Since Mary, Queen of Scotland, was a child, the English wanted a country and her crowns. She is sent to France to wed its next king, to save herself and her people. A bond that should protect her, but there are forces that conspire. Forces of darkness, forces of the heart. Long may she reign.
Hello, and welcome to Media-eval, a medieval pop culture podcast, where we talk about how medieval and medieval-inspired movies, TV, and books depict the medieval world. What did they get right? What did they get wrong? And what do they tell us about how modern people see the medieval past? I'm Sarah ifft, a medieval historian, and today I'm joined by Molly Likovich to discuss Season 1 of the CW show Reign. So welcome, Molly.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk about Reign.
Thank you so much for joining me. So why don't you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and about why you wanted to talk about this particular show?
Absolutely. So many moons ago, when there was only 2 seasons of Reign out, my father and I were trying to pick a show to watch together, and it was on Netflix, and I suggested that. I had heard of Mary, Queen of Scots referenced once in a Pretty Little Liars episode, and was like, oh, I want to watch a show about a queen. And he was bored. He didn't like it. So then within like a week, I had binged all of it. I knew nothing about any of the history. Like, I knew vaguely when this was happening and who Queen Elizabeth was, right, but I knew nothing about who Mary was. But I loved the show so much, and I loved how Adelaide Kane was playing Mary so much, that just my ADHD was like, we're going to hyperfixate, and I would just research her for fun, and I started reading biographies about her for fun, and I was like, this woman is what's up. And so then in 2018, I worked on a docuseries on my YouTube about monarchs, like female monarchs I thought had been underrepresented or misrepresented. And I thought she had been underrepresented because there was Reign, but like she was always just kind of like a minor character in other movies and referenced. And this was right when the trailer had dropped for Saoirse Ronan's movie. So I was like, this is the time. I got to talk to Dr. Anna Groundwater from the University of Edinburgh and Dr. Kristen Post-Walton from Salisbury University about her, and just learned so much more about her, read more books about her, thought it was fascinating. And I now have a tattoo of her because I'm obsessed with her. I love her. I think she was an amazing person in history. And even I recently rewatched Reign in the summer, and even though it's like incredibly historically inaccurate, I just adore Adelaide Kane as an actress and how they wrote her. She has so many great one-liners, and actually on my Mary Queen of Scots tattoo, we have a line from Reign on it where in one season, I don't think it's the first, it might be the first one, where she says, do not test my power and do not tempt my fury. And
that's a good line.
I just love her. I love the show. It's ridiculous, but actually when I brought it up to Dr. Anna Groundwater, who like covers the Stuart dynasty at the University of Edinburgh, I said how I learned about her was the show Reign. And Dr. Groundwater, you know, this professional Stuart historian, was like, oh, it's the most marvelous program. Like, she loved it because it got people to learn who she was. When, you know, like most everyone knows who like Queen Elizabeth I was and like how that's happening. But so many people don't know like about her other than her connection to Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So I really loved this show. I would watch it with like my girlfriend and her roommates. We'd be like, oh, it's Reign night, it's Tuesday, it's Reign, and we were so invested. And yeah, so when I started listening to your podcast and I saw you were doing a mix of like fantasy and things actually in the Middle Ages and things just like around the Middle Ages, I was like, it would be so fun if she talked about Reign, since it's such a hot mess of a show. Because it is, like, it's so fun, but it's ridiculous. And when I went back and rewatched it after like years of researching this woman, and I knew all the inaccuracy, because like I watched it the first time, I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen. I knew she married the king, so I knew like the made up bastard son was. I was like, I would assume
that's
if she's
not gonna
historically calm. But watching it again, there were so many things I just found hilarious.
Yep.
There's times where it screams this was written by a man. And so, yeah, I love that they didn't even put Adelaide Kane in a wig. They were like, whatever. Mary has
check out this raven hair.
Like, whatever. For real, when I started watching, it was like, I could have sworn that woman had red hair based on what little I knew. And when I like looked it up, I was like, okay, so this show really... I remember my dad, the 2 episodes he watched with me, he said, is that how they dressed back then? And I said, I don't think so. I don't feel like this is right.
Nope, it is not.
My girlfriend's roommate in college would always be like, this is ridiculous. Who is costuming this? Forever 21? We're like, probably.
It really does seem like that.
No, like they're all wearing prom dresses. And like, I remember interviews I watched about the show is like they had always set out for it to literally look like that because they wanted to drive home the fact that they were teenagers. Like the costumer and the writers and directors talked about at the time the show came out how so many, like, there weren't any, like, shows about monarchies that were targeted at teens specifically and people in their 20s. And so even when you cover stuff like the Tudors, Anne Boleyn was, like, barely in her 20s when she got there. Right. But you always, like, view them as, like, older because, these people get to run a country. But she was, like, a teenager running a country. And he was a teenager running a country. And so they were, like, by costuming them in, like, this anachronistic way of, like, modern teenagers playing at being in a castle, it made it very clear to the audience, like, wow, these countries are letting teenagers make the decisions.
Inexplicably, right. And it does very much have this Gossip Girl, but in 16th century France overall vibe, which I found baffling but fascinating.
I think it does a good job, though, of getting across how absurd it was, that we would just be like, yeah, this child can run a nation.
It's fine.
Because, like, you can't even drink now until you're 21. And back then they were like, you should be in charge of armies, I think.
Yeah,
like,
you're 14. That's old enough, right?
You decide who lives and dies, I think, actually. Like, I think that's a good call.
That seems good. This seems normal and fine. So one of the reasons, actually, that I do venture on occasion into early modernity in this show is because my journey toward becoming a historian actually started with reading in general about a lot of English history, and in particular English royal history, in advance of a family trip to England, because I'd always liked history, but I'd never really done European history because schools make us do too much American history in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And basically started in a kind of combination of medieval and early modern stuff and never really left. But I still just have such strong memories of on that trip and a trip the following year of being in England and in Scotland and seeing a lot of the sites associated with Mary, as well as with Elizabeth and with the wives of Henry VIII, who I'm also very, very fond of and interested in.
Oh, yeah, same.
So I came into this, I would say, not necessarily being an expert in Mary in particular, but certainly knowing enough generally about the period to immediately be like, what is happening here?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, my dad, who watched the first few episodes with me, knew nothing about how monarchies worked. And so, like, in the second episode, when, like, those two children are, like, getting betrothed, my dad was, like, horrified. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? Like, he couldn't
Why are these 9-year-olds getting engaged?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, she was an infant, and they were like, you're queen, and you're gonna marry this guy.
Yeah, like, you're fine.
It's good. It's good to go.
Yeah. And I also will say that I have a weird fascination with and sort of love of Catherine de Medici, who is obviously a very controversial figure and certainly a very ruthless figure, although I'll have lots to say about her as we go on and the things that I like and the things that I'm kind of on in terms of how this show portrays her. But
I have a lot of issues. Once I knew the history and I went back and watched it, I was like, a man wrote this.
Yes, but I did really enjoy a lot about her character and really just loved seeing her on screen. She was so much fun.
Yeah, if you go to watch, like, the later seasons, she gets even more and more prominent, and, like, you get even more about her and Mary, like, having a relationship. It's great. She's very fun, but it's clear in this first season they were like, how do we write about two women? I know, they'll hate each other. And it's like that.
Obviously.
Okay, there's no evidence of that, but.
Right. And I will have a lot to say also at various points later about other relationships between women, Diane de Poitiers and Catherine Koff, which are not quite the expected that you see in this show. But we'll get into all of that. A few just details about our cast. So Reign was first started in the 2013-2014 season is when it was first on TV. And season 1 is all we'll be discussing today because that is all I have watched thus far, though I am curious and I think might watch more. It stars Adelaide Kane as Mary, Queen of Scots, Megan follows as Catherine de Medici. There's a number of other people, of course, in the main cast. I will say I have not heard of or seen any of them in anything with the exception of Rossif Sutherland, who plays Nostradamus, who is Donald Sutherland's son and also was in the movie Timeline, which I covered for this.
Toby Regbo, who is Francis, and Torrance Combs is Basher, like pretty big Canadian.
Okay.
There've been a lot of Canadian stuff. I believe Torrance Combs was actually in an episode of The Tudors, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, he was. He played the guy that, if you got as far enough to see Catherine Howard, he was the guy that she was, like, unfaithful to her husband with.
Oh, he was Thomas Culpepper.
Yeah, that's his name. That's who he played. Terrible person in that. They have, like, a scene where he raped somebody. I was like, wow, they took a turn. Yeah, they've been in, nothing huge, but they've been in a lot of, like, other smaller things. Mm-hmm. This was kind of like, well, like, just like Adelaide Kane, this was her big role, too, and now she's been in more stuff. I follow her on TikTok. I love her. I think she's stunning, amazing. She's actually she's Australian in real life. Did you know that? Yeah.
I saw when I was looking that up. Her accent is not bad.
Everyone's doing a generic, they're pulling, like, the Game of Thrones accent, where it's, like, kind of British. Yeah. Because no one's speaking in French, obviously. Just that one random girl, Olivia, in the first few
Right, that she has a French accent, which is, like, kind of jarring.
Nobody else. Everyone else is doing that they're doing the Fantasyland accent of, like, we're in the past. So.
And Nostradamus has an interesting accent.
Yeah, he's like, I'm mysterious. And that's his way of talking.
And he actually did also in Timeline play a French character and did like an actual French accent for that, which I feel like he's almost doing here, but not quite.
Yeah. Everyone's doing like just something that like us Americans who aren't historians were like, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Like that sounds like how they spoke back in the day.
Right. And at least they're all sort of the same. I find it very jarring when I see things where there are people with this just wild range of accents. They do have a couple of people, though, in this who pop up very briefly who are supposed to be Scottish and then just have, like, heavy Scottish accents.
Yeah, that's when it's weird, is when people show up to talk to her. And, I mean, people have argued that whether or not she would have had a French accent since she lived in the convent in France from such a young age, that she might have had a French accent for most of her life until she moved back to Scotland and then her native Scottish accent took over. But, yeah, I remember, like, the episode where all the Scotsmen come, they all just sound so heavy Scottish, like, and I'm like, oh, well, now it's weird because she's talking like she's English.
That did make sense to me, that her accent marks her as at least connected to the French court as opposed to sounding Scottish. Yeah, because she was only 5, so it makes sense to me that she would have kind of lost any.
It gets really Scottish indistinguishable though in later seasons when we do start seeing the English court, because we're like, so just everyone's got a British accent.
Yeah, they're just all British. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
This show was made for Americans. They were definitely like, I don't think we're pulling in a UK audience with this one.
Certainly not a French audience.
Can you imagine, like, the English watching this? They'd be so mad. Like, excuse me. This is like slander against Queen Elizabeth. The girl who played, Anna Popplewell, who played Lola, was in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh, is she Susan? That's right.
Yeah,
I just processed that.
Yeah, that was the first thing I noticed when I watched this show. I was like, wait, hold on. And I got out, like, IMDb, and I'm like, that's what I thought. Yeah, she's from Narnia.
The one other actor, actually, that I know, and I do not remember his name, but when at some point we have Lord Julian pop up in the last few episodes, I'm currently watching Grey's Anatomy, and I just immediately screamed, Andrew DeLuca is here!
It's amazing.
I'm so excited to see him.
It's quite a show. It's quite a cast. I think it's very well cast, too. I think everyone is perfect in their roles.
Yeah, I think people do a good job.
I especially think Adelaide and Megan are just amazingly cast as Catherine and Mary. Like, they're carrying the show on their back. Like, whenever anyone else is giving, like, kind of a weak performance, those two just swoop. And the scenes that are the two of them are, like, such intense powerhouse scenes. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Astounding.
And they are fairly young. They're not quite as young as they're supposed to be, but the teens, I mean. But like Adelaide Kane, for example, would have been 23 when this was filmed, which as Hollywood goes, you know, or as film and TV go, I feel like, you know, to a 23-year-old playing a 16-year-old isn't too bad.
That's pretty on the nose. Like for what? Yeah, they all look like they're in their 20s and they're supposed to be like in their late teens. I think Toby, who's playing Francis, looks like a teenager though. I think he's much more passable. I mean, and he was younger than her in real life, if I recall correctly. They have I think they have the one episode where they make a joke about how he actually was like sickly looking in real life. Right. Where she's like, everyone says you're sickly, and he's like, oh, one bad portrait in the whole world.
I was cracking up during that scene. I'm like, all right, Francis, with your undescended testicles, like...
Yeah, like, you can tell the writers knew the history and just didn't care a lot. It's different than, like, where, like, I love Six, the musical, but, you know, like, they were candid that they did almost no research. Yeah. They were like, we read a book, and we're like, I have an idea. Like, it's obvious these people knew the history because it seems really purposeful where they deviate from it. And the parts where they acknowledge that they're ignoring the history, like, that is so funny to me. I love that part.
There's a line, actually, at some point that Bash says something about being worried that he'll be forgotten. I'm like, is that a joke because he doesn't exist and therefore we forgotten him?
Yeah, and it's like, because if he had like this, you know, it'd be one thing if this man had like a bunch of bastard sons. Like, it's probable that kings had those, but it's like we would know if him with his like very specific mistress.
His very long-term mistress. And if they did have a son, he absolutely would have recognized him and he would have gotten titles and all of that.
Yeah, like this isn't a Jon Snow scenario. Like people would have known if this guy existed.
Yeah, people would have known a lot. And that's pretty common among European royalty, that there are often bastard sons that, because, you know, depending on what the relationship is with the mother and other factors, it's not uncommon for them to be recognized. And actually, at some point, Mary's illegitimate half-brother pops up, who was recognized and who was titled. And, so that wouldn't have been rare. So if this person had existed, we would know about him.
Well, this was in the era of, like, we had come off of Twilight and we're in the middle of the Hunger Games. So this is very much like a YA show. Yeah. And love triangles were what was in. Yes. And so they were like, we need to make one up. Where do we get it from? And they were like, there's no evidence that she, like, loved anyone else, and she doesn't marry anybody else till much later in her life. So they were like, time to create somebody. And I love that they went the way of not, like, the classic, she fell in love with, like, a poor person or a servant. It was just like, actually, we're going to make up an illegitimate son. I think that's what we're going to do.
I think
and he's almost going to be the king of France.
Yeah, like, that makes sense.
That was something where when I was watching it, I started Googling because I like had heard of her and Prince Francis, and I was like, I'm pretty sure she doesn't marry this guy. And I like looked it up, and I was like, okay, yeah, they made him up.
I actually Googled because I was just like, this person doesn't exist, right? Like, I would remember this person if he existed.
Because it gets, like, really important, like, halfway through the scene. He starts out, well, this is back when, like, network TV would sometimes be, like, being written as it's releasing. So I definitely feel like they were, like, gauging how fans felt. And we're like, oh, they like him. Lean into that. This is also back when you had to watch, like, terrible pilots. Because if you watch, like, the pilot of Reign versus the rest of the season, it's hilarious. They're not even on the same set in the pilot that they are in the other episodes. Like, you, that makes sense. When you watch them, like, walking around inside the castle, you never see those hallways again. But it is funny because, like, in the rest of the season, there's, like, 2 hallways that you see them in. They like, are, like, they built 2 sets, and they're, like, we got the main room with the thrones. We have the hallway outside that room, and the hallway by Mary's room, and that's all anybody needs to see.
Like, we're good.
They're like, here's the kitchen. But yeah, and like, Francis is in a room that he's never in again in the pilot. Everyone's hair looks different in the pilot.
Right.
Ends up looking. Yeah, and she just has her hair in her face, like, the whole pilot, because, you know, that's how you would look back then.
Well, in general, I would say, I'll talk more later about material culture, but in general, there is very little attention paid, in particular for Mary and her ladies-in-waiting, to having anything even resembling historically accurate hairstyles.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Like, they have a lot of, like, boho, like, beads and ribbons going through their hair. I find it very funny.
Yeah. And, like, braids and stuff. Again, it's something where in later seasons, they leaned a little bit more into them looking somewhat In later seasons, it felt more like a Hamilton thing. Like, they looked historically accurate enough, but, like, their hair and everything wasn't. But, yeah, the first season was very much just, like, modern girls. If, like, modern girls were to be kings and queens and stuff now, how would they want to dress if they dressed fancy every day? And it would be in prom dresses and shit. And so that's
it basically is like Gossip Girl, where you have all of these really rich people who go to a lot of wild parties and get to dress up in very fancy, expensive clothing for it. And that is basically the vibe that we have, certainly of the women. The men are sort of...
so much about the women. The men each got, like, one doublet, and we're like, that's it. Because they knew there was not a male audience for this show.
No.
I have, to this day, never met a male fan of the show. It's also, like, weirdly, almost all the fans I've met are queer women. Because, like, I watched it in college with a bunch of queer girls, and my creative partner, Mar, loved the show. Yeah, I think it was just, like... Because, like, there's nothing gay about the show, and yet it's, like, so camp. Because it's so over the top, the way they're dressed, the way they're acting, like, it's so, I don't know. I'm sure there's heteros out there who really enjoy the show, but it was I've never met men. The thing is with the show is they immediately knew their target audience, and they completely didn't care that they, you know, like, a lot of times when things get marketed specifically to teenage girls, the creators still try to put stuff in it that can, like, bring in men. And this show was like, no. They were like, we don't care. This is for teen girls. And I was like, I guess I was like 19 when I started watching it. And I was like, I was the perfect demographic when this came out. I was like, absolutely, yes. Yeah. Like, let's go immediately into this.
Yeah, and I will say also as a bi woman, the women in this show are so much hotter than the men in this show.
Oh, like, my God.
Francis, I remember, like, they're trying so hard to, like, have him not look sickly. And I'm like, he still looks kind of sickly. And I'm not here for this situation.
I don't think Bash is attractive.
What is Bash's haircut? What is Bash's haircut?
King
he
Henry
maybe
is
could
not
be
attractive.
No.
King Henry is not attractive. I mean, and Megan Follows is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's
and
like,
Marie DeGeese is stunning. Like, all of the women are gorgeous.
Women are all just full smoke shows. And then the men, like, I think Adelaide Kate is so beautiful. I forget her name, but the actress who plays Kenna is stunning. Yeah, it's such a show for, like, queer teenage girls, and it's amazing. It's so chaotic. It's so over the top. Yeah, the costumes are a mess, and that's what I just love that they don't even try.
Oh, not at all.
That's because, you know, when something like Bridgerton comes out, everyone and their mom has to be like, actually, historically, corsets. And this show was like, we don't care.
No.
We don't care.
Don't worry about it.
They're going to be wearing a strapless sundress with sequins, even though the year is like 1500 something.
Yeah. That's what they wore in 1557.
No, exactly. No, No, you can see it in, like, museums.
Yeah. So I really feel that I need to make sure to talk through, in case there are listeners who have not watched the show, I need to explain some of the plot line around the will they, won't they of Mary and Francis's marriage. A marriage
It's hilarious that they did that. Oh, will they, won't they, with people who historically got married and ruled.
And had been engaged since they were 5. Or since she was 5 and he was 3. Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know now. I don't know.
Right. So on his side / his father's side, there is this question of, well, do we actually think that this alliance with Scotland is a good idea? Which basically gets resolved by the fact that at some point it suddenly occurs to them. I don't know why it took so long for this to occur to them, but it suddenly occurs to them that, oh, the Catholic Queen of England, Mary Tudor, is going to die soon, probably, and she doesn't have an heir, and she's getting to the point where she's probably not going to have an heir, and the next person in line is her Protestant half-sister, who one could argue is illegitimate. I wonder if that could give Mary possibly a claim to the throne of England. Cool. So they kind of suddenly discover that, and that takes care of that issue.
It's weird how late they realize that. They're like, because I'm like, yeah, duh, like, she, like, and like, I think the world would have been a better place in the long run if Mary had ruled England, because she was just historically, like, a kinder ruler who believed in, like, religious tolerance, whereas Queen Elizabeth was like, let's have Catholics disemboweled in the street for fun, and it's like, oh, I don't love that, and, but yeah, it's so weird that they wait till like halfway through the season to be like, hold on now. Also, just like, didn't you want Scottish armies? Like, wasn't that part of your freaking alliance the whole time? And they're like,
yeah.
And they're like, no, whatever.
Also, the thing, by the way, that I just realized, I was actively angry during the first episode at the fact that they have us watch, it's the first episode or the second, that they have us watch the marriage and consummation of the marriage between Philip II and Elizabeth de Valois. My thing that I was annoyed about as I was watching it was really just, excuse me, how dare you present this as this attractive young couple as opposed to a man who is probably like dour as fuck and terrible marrying a woman 20 years his junior. I hate Philip II, but I'm not going to get into all of those details.
I mean, yeah, that's not shocking.
But the other reason this is a problem is because Philip II could not have married Elizabeth de Valois in the first episode of this show because he is currently married to Mary Tudor.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. This show actually takes place in an alternate timeline where...
Right. But yes, but I literally just processed that I'm like, oh, right. They have him
hold on.
Get married like a solid 2 years too early.
I also just like that the first season covers such a minuscule amount of time.
Yeah.
And then it was like, after that, they were like, maybe we should get moving if the show is supposed to span her whole adult life. And then the first season's just like... I swear to God, we're going like week by week. They're like, and then Tuesday, like.
Yeah. So the other big element in the will they, won't they, is that Catherine de Medici, who is Francis's mother and who I think is just such a fascinating figure, she has this court astrologer, Nostradamus, who is known for various predictions. And I'll talk more about Nostradamus later as well. But in this, we have Nostradamus predicting to Catherine that if Francis marries Mary, that he will die a young death. And so Catherine,
it's so stupid.
It's ridiculous. And so Catherine is like doing all of these convoluted plots to keep them from getting married to save Francis's life.
That is the most absurd. First of all, I just accepted it the first time I watched it because I was like, all right, whatever. Royals were insane. And then once I like spent a year doing research and it was like all this evidence that they liked each other and respected one another, I was like, wow, the men were really writing the show like, all right, we're going to need some conflict here. We can't just be relying on the love triangle. Let's have women hate each other to an unrealistic degree. And it gets funnier in later seasons because it's like you can tell the writers couldn't tell if they wanted to like abandon that or not because they'll very aggressively flip-flop in later seasons from like finally starting to be friends and respecting each other to like just...
Even in this season, there's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, it gets worse.
Moments, where they kind of like each other and are allied, and then it's like, I'm going to murder all of your men, and then you're going to slap me in the face.
Yeah, they end up as friends in the end, but which they were the whole time, actually. That's just also hilarious that that's the pilot. Like, that's like the beginning of the show, is Nostradamus having a vision and then being like, she's coming. Like, and then they like show it, and I love the theme song. And I love, like, I have it on my iPod. I was playing, or not my iPod, my phone. I had an iPod back then, because this was back in the day. But I have it downloaded, and I play it all the time. And I have a Mary Queen of Scots playlist, but I played it before this. The song is literally called Scotland by the Lumineers. I'm pretty sure they wrote it for this.
I would assume so, yeah.
It slaps. It's great. And, like, I love, like, in later, like, episodes, they stop doing the Nostradamus narration. But I love when he's like, but there are forces that conspire. Forces of darkness. Forces of the heart. Long may she reign. Like, I love it. It's amazing.
I really like the narration. It's silly.
So over the top. And the fact that they, and it's like the footage they're showing looks like stock footage. Like, of
it
just
really
like,
does. And then later I'm like, oh, this scene actually was in the intro. Weird.
It's hilarious. It's an amazing over the top. But yeah, that the first episode, he's like, actually, this whole thing you've been planning for well over a decade, it's gonna kill your son. And she's like, oh.
She's like, yeah, cool, I'm fine. I will stop it with my
and so then in
poison
the pilot,
and meanness.
And so then in the pilot episode, she has the boyfriend, essentially, of one of Mary's ladies, Lola, she says, like, the only way he can, like, stay in this court and marry Lola is if he goes and rapes Mary.
Drugs and rapes. He attempts to, like, roofie her.
But she doesn't because when she's getting ready, she hears a mysterious voice in the wall say, "Don't drink the wine." And so then when she's at the ball and this guy Colin hands her the wine, she remembers the voice and doesn't drink the wine. And I'm like, I wish I'd been in this writer's room because it must have been insane. These people had like history textbooks out and were like, okay, but what if? And that brings in like the other hidden child.
Yes, well, because also, given that there are supernatural-ish bits, I genuinely, for a while, was like, oh, is she just legitimately straight up, like, a ghost or something?
Oh, yeah, I did, too. I thought it was a ghost.
But then, yes,
I thought it was a ghost.
But this is Catherine de Medici's illegitimate daughter.
Well, because she's, like, deformed, and
Because she had this birthmark, which is, like, the family birthmark of the guy she was sleeping with, which also, by the way, I just saw this in another thing that I covered, and this is not a thing. Like, that's not actually how birthmarks work. Like, there aren't, like, distinctive family birthmarks that run across generations.
It's a real Man in the Iron Mask situation.
Yeah.
It's her deformed child hiding in the walls, just warning Mary about her mom's nefarious bullshit.
Right. Yes. And so we have, like, that whole situation. And eventually Catherine's last-ditch final resort, how I'm gonna stop this marriage, is to just tell Mary. It takes her a real long time to do that, but to tell Mary and convince Mary of the prophecy, and she's convinced also because Nostradamus makes another prophecy that one of her ladies in waiting will die, and she does.
Because yeah, he said one of his girls would never, he told Ailey, another one of her ladies, she would never see her home again.
Yeah.
And so then Ailey accidentally drinks poison that Catherine left for Kenna, Mary's other lady, who's sleeping with the king, Catherine's husband. And Ailey falls down the stairs. And the thing is, it's like not even the poison that's what kills her. It makes her dizzy. And she falls down the stairs and hits her head on the stone and bleeds out.
Like, maybe the poison would have killed her eventually, but at first they don't even know it's poison, and then they're like, and then I saw a cat drinking from the cup that spilled, and then the cat died.
It's so convoluted. Oh, yeah, well, so Kenna, one of Mary's ladies are Kenna, Ailey, Greal, and Lola, and they all have their own bullshit going on every season.
So much
and
bullshit.
Kenna's bullshit is, in the pilot episode, you know, they watched that ridiculous consummation scene, and it's, I guess, like them seeing porn for the first time. So then they're like, oh, we have to go. And they all like run in different...
in the corridor.
She's masturbating on the hallway. and then the king comes up. And this is what I love about this scene, is the king comes up and he like puts his hand over her hand, masturbating. And she like leans into it, having no clue who's behind her. And then turns around and is like... And she's like, oh, your majesty. And then he's like, may I? And then they continue. And then they don't have, like, penetrative sex, we learn, for a while.
Right.
But yeah, she wants to be, like, his formal mistress. And he's like, I already have a mistress.
You know, the one everybody's heard of because she's a real person, Diane de Poitiers.
There's, like, this hilarious subplot line of that. There's, like, the episode where he has, like, all the lanterns on the lawn spell out Kenna. Right. And she, like, runs.
I groaned when that happened.
It's so funny, and Mary's all like, I'm sorry, you're doing what?
You're fucking my soon-to-be father-in-law? I'm sorry?
Who already has, like, a mistress and already fucks all these other women, too.
And has a wife.
Who's also, like, the mother of my fiancé. Okay, cool, got it, great. Well, and then Ailey dies. That's her whole thing. And then Greer's whole thing is that she is not technically a lady. She wasn't like of a nobility standing. She was just like a merchant's daughter. So she needs to marry well. And instead, she starts falling in love with, what's his name? The baker? I forget his name. Laith, yeah. So they start having a whole thing.
Laith, who, by the way, is the most English man I have ever seen, and the idea of him being French, just, like, fundamentally I can't process.
Well, like, Lola is incredibly English-looking.
That too, and
she's supposed to be Scottish. Like, okay.
Right. But Greer's appropriate husband is actually like low-key one of my favorite characters. It is this
he's
man,
great.
Lord Castleroy, who is titled, but who also is very much involved in mercantile activity, and in particular is a spice merchant, and his main thing is that he deals in pepper. And that is like his two interests in the world are pepper and Greer. And those are the only things he gives a shit about.
You don't need more than that. She's all, like, so annoyed about it. And it's like, I don't know, if I lived in that time period and that was the I'd be like, fine.
He's the nicest man in this entire show.
I'm like, look at the bullshit your friends are putting up with. Oh, well, yeah, and so, like, Lola's boyfriend gets put to death for trying to rape Mary because she wakes up during it because she didn't drink the wine. And Lola then is really mean to Mary. Like, that's Mary's fault. And, Lola always talks back to Mary. And I'm like, Mary is still the queen, you entitled brat. And also, I hate Lola so much.
They tried to rape her. That's not on her.
And she's like, oh, he said he was forced to do it. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care why.
I mean, I agree with that. But if she wants to try to not be angry at her fiancé on the grounds that he was forced, that's one move, but at the very least, just focus on being angry at the person who forced him and not on the woman that he tried to rape, who was also supposedly your friend and also, like, your boss and queen.
Well, we get the fun bit where Greer is interested in, like, this prince. Is he Spanish or what is that it? No, he's
Portuguese. Yes, the illegitimate son of the King of Portugal, another illegitimate son who does not exist.
And he shows up, and Greer's trying to hit on him, but he's into Mary. And Mary's really struggling to get Francis and Henry II to, like, follow through on this alliance promise they made years ago. And so she's really feeling unstable with the state of her country because she's already a queen. And so that's another thing. These men are entitled fucks. Like, Francis acts like he's so much better than her. And I'm like, she's literally above you, though. Yeah. Like, she literally has a country, and you don't.
You technically have nothing right now.
Yeah, you're waiting for your man to die. And so she ends up, he's like, hey, marry me. And she's like, all right then. Because Francis finally realizes he loves her, but he's like, because, like, I don't know, like, they do a war move, it doesn't go well. And he's like, he realizes they just can't help her country the way she needs. And they have, like, this beautiful scene where they, like, kiss out on, like, the lawn. And he's like, you should marry Tomas, is that it? Yeah. And she's like, what? And now you realize they're so torn. And so you think she's gonna marry Tomas, and Greer's all salty about it. She's like, I liked him. And it's like, Greer, again, check your status. You are still a servant. Like, yeah. And then Mary meets up in secret with Francis anyway, and they kiss, and Tomas's servant witnesses it.
And Tomas goes from a perfectly normal, nice person in one episode to an abusive monster in the next episode in this, like, very 0 to 60.
He has a whipping boy, makes it clear he will beat Mary once she's his wife. So then they decide, you know what? Time to convict him of murder, actually. And so they, like, again, in one episode, an elaborate plot happens while they're getting ready for a masquerade ball during the day.
Yeah, it's fine.
And they're able to, like, prove that he murdered somebody, and they have 2 witnesses. They drag the dead body in. Pretty sure they kill him.
They murder him. Yeah, it's that they have the evidence and they want to bring him in alive, but they're fighting him, and then as they're fighting,
it doesn't work, so they kill him.
I think Francis is the one who actually does it, but it's Francis and Bash.
You want to talk about, like, the incredibly offensive portrayal of paganism in this show?
Okay, I do, but first I want to actually like briefly explain the Bash situation. Which go for it. The paganism.
Yeah, it does lead into the paganism. Okay. Go for it.
So Mary's cool idea, once she finds out about the prophecy, is, well, okay, so I know that Diane de Poitiers is trying to have her non-existent illegitimate son, Sebastian/Bash, legitimized, and to then supplant Francis as the heir to the throne. So she says, okay, I'm going to get in on that whole situation, and tells Henry, I'll marry your son and he's going to be the next king of France, and I'll make the claim to England for you, but it's not going to be Francis, it's going to be Bash. So then we have this whole, like, multi-episode arc of Mary almost marrying Francis's non-existent illegitimate brother, and then the two brothers, like, fighting over her. So yeah, so we can have this YA love triangle, and it is hilarious.
Well, they have, like, one episode where they run away, and Francis is, like, chasing after, and he's like, Mary! And, like, again, what I love about this show is they'll set up these huge plot arcs that end within an episode. So we're like, oh my god, they're running away, but then, like, they come back in the next episode. Yeah. They, like, jump off a cliff, and then...
And then there's, like, 3 episodes where it's like, actually, Francis isn't going to be king, and Mary's going to marry his brother, and then it's like, never mind. Nostradamus said that, like, everything changed and the prophecy's different now, don't worry about it. We're good.
Yep. So... I'm just going through the notes. So yeah, then they get back and they're like, never mind. Well, so then we have the paganism. So apparently,
yes,
Diane, Bash's mom, again, as someone who, like, has researched paganism, is friends with pagans, this is such an offensive take, but they do it anyway. They lean into the Christian old trope that pagans are, like, these evil human sacrificing devil worshippers in the woods, and we learn that Bash is descended from these fucking pagans that are so creepy and violent, and Bash ends up, like, there's, like...
Yes, it's, like, one-man battle.
He murders somebody because, like, somebody left a deer's head in Mary's bedroom.
Well, because he interrupted a sacrifice, and so now they're like, we're just gonna pick somebody we think you like to be the new sacrifice. I guess we'll murder the Queen of Scotland.
Yeah,
cool,
that's
right?
their move. That's the move. Not anyone else. They're like, we're going big or not at all. And then we think he's going to sacrifice this random guy, but then he ends up, like, sacrificing the pagan murderer. But then when they're riding back, the servant he was going to sacrifice is like, you knew those pagan incantations pretty well. And he's like, tell me who my mother is. And the guy's like, you're Bash, the Diane de Porte's son. And he's like, oh no, this guy knows I'm a pagan. And so he pushes him off a cliff. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Interesting. I don't even remember what's happening in the part where, like, him and Mary do, like, oh, there's someone they were trying to save and they died, and so then they, like, go cut their hands and bleed on the grave together like the pagans used to do, and it's like, they're so in love.
Bash's half-sister whose father, or cousin or something, whose father was a traitor.
Oh, yeah, right.
And
yeah, so they try to, like, make you think Mary and Bash are in love, and, like, they're so not. Like, she's not in love with him, and he's in love with her, but she loves Francis.
I mean, she likes Bash.
She likes him, but she obviously isn't.
Yeah.
She's in love with Francis. So, I mean, spoiler alert, as is stated in history, she marries Francis.
And Bash ends up with Kenna, which...
As punishment.
Yeah.
Well, like, and as punishment, Henry makes Bash watch the consummation. Ew. Yeah, and then as punishment, Bash ends up with Kenna, and they both, like, fucking hate each other at first.
And then they just have a lot of sex, I guess, and figure it out.
And then they're in love. They're both, like... There's, like, a scene where Kenna's like, I'm not the only one trying to forget somebody in this bed, because she keeps thinking about his father, and he's thinking about Mary, and it's like, ew, okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I will also add in that there are 2 separate reasons that I find the whole pagan plotline offensive. One is because... there probably were people who are still secret pagans here and there.
Yeah.
And they're probably not committing a lot of human sacrifice. Like, it's a pretty gross depiction.
Probably.
And the other reason I'm offended is because it's one of those things that it seems like they're doing that as essentially as a way to have the pagans fill in for the actual people who the crown is just sort of murdering willy-nilly, who are Protestants.
Yep.
Because at least in this season, it seems like even though they obliquely reference on occasion the fact that there are these Catholic-Protestant conflicts, It seems like basically they want there to be a group of people that the crown can murder essentially with abandon, that you can say it's okay because they're evil and do these awful things. And I guess they don't want to say that about Protestants, because there's like a lot of real Protestants who might be watching
in
this.
later seasons, when they introduce Elizabeth, they very wholeheartedly lean into like fuck Protestantism. And like the former Catholic in me, I am like, I'll fall for Catholic propaganda and media. I was watching The Conjuring 3 last night and was like, hell yeah, I love the Warrens. This witchcraft is evil. I always joke, I'm like, I hate the Catholic Church until I'm watching any horror movie. And then I'm like, yeah, go get them. And so like watching anything with Mary Queen of Scots, I'm like, yeah, take down the Protestant church. Like they're so oppressive. And so they definitely lean more into it in later seasons. They always show that Mary was, as she historically was, about religious tolerance. And they show that a little in this show, that she doesn't believe in religious hierarchy, unless it's paganism, and then
it's fine.
That's where it also doesn't work, because historically she was about religious tolerance. Now, would she have been like okay with paganism when that was so demonized back then? Like, no, probably not. But it's just weird if we're doing it modern to be like, and these evil witches out here in the woods. And it's like, it just was an easy thing to shove in, especially since they were trying to be like supernatural with Nostradamus and his visions.
It's like now we have the evil pagans with their prophecies. But yeah, and I have no dog in this Catholic versus Protestant fight because I'm Jewish, and they
you're like, I don't care. You guys can go at.
It's like you were both awful to the Jews. So,
exactly.
I'm teaching
the moral of the story is, why pick Christianity at all?
Right? I'm teaching this course actually right now on anti-Judaism, and it's great because you can. My students, who are largely Protestant, spend the first chunk of the course, which is medieval. You can tell that at least some of them are like, oh, I mean, so this is clearly like a really bad element of the history of my faith, but it's okay because like it's the Catholics who are doing this, and then I get to hit them with Martin Luther's On the Jews and Their Lies, and they're like, oh, this one's even worse. I'm like, yep, sorry.
Yeah, my friend Mara and I were both raised very Catholic, and now, like, I essentially do practice, like, paganism and witchcraft, and we're always like, and that goes out the door the second I'm watching a Conjuring film. The second Lorraine Warren tells me witchcraft is evil, I'm like, absolutely right. God is good, Lorraine. Go get him. Like, literally every time I was watching, like, I've seen them all a million times. I was watching the third one last night, and when they're like, our love is a gift from God, and God will protect. I'm like, hell yeah. The second I watch any exorcism scene in a movie, I'm like, yes, the power of Christ compels you. Like, every time. Like, I always am quoting the line from the first one where he's like, Bathsheba, by the power of Jesus Christ, I condemn you back to hell. I'm always like, yeah. Like, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I do think also this show was just, at least in the first season, since they were trying to get an audience, didn't want to lean into how religious everything was back then.
And the reality of religious intolerance.
Yeah, because, and just like how so much of the feuds wasn't just about power, was about like the idea of religious power, because obviously they believed back then in divine right, that you were ordained by God. So if you think your religion is the one true faith, then obviously the people who aren't that religion are not ordained by God, they're usurping. And so in their mind, Mary Tudor's dying, and she's a Catholic, and so obviously Queen Elizabeth is not ordained by God because she's a Protestant. So obviously, I mean, by their own rules, Mary Queen of Scots should have been queen, in my opinion. I also just hate Queen Elizabeth. And so, but like, it's, yeah. So what do you want to talk about next in this season? Because there's so much.
I need to talk about the Henry II.
Yeah, how they're going to try and murder him.
Well, but also that he goes mad. Like,
oh yeah, he goes crazy.
Like, he becomes a serial killer.
Oh yeah, accidentally kills that woman while having sex against a window.
And then he's like, oh, actually killing women while having sex is fun. And then just like chokes at least one to death.
He goes like full American Psycho about it. Like, and it's like, oh, okay.
And he has this whole episode where he's like, I think somebody has betrayed me. And then, like, there's one person who is clearly not that person, who he just stabs for fun. He also is, like, seeing dead people and hallucinating his older brother, he had an older brother who died under somewhat mysterious circumstances, and somebody was accused of having poisoned him. Well, according to this, it was Henri II who murdered his older brother so he could be king. So that's a whole thing.
No, it's ridiculous. But yeah, they're leaning into that apparently he killed his brother.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
They also really lead into the whole bit in which he is just trying to, like, invade everywhere in Europe, and he's wandering around talking about this, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm leaving for Calais immediately, and then he's like, I am not wearing pants.
And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, I guess.
There's also the excellent little arc involving that, where he, on top of all of his various other women, there's this party where there is a, cake that has a bean inside it.
Oh my God.
Whoever finds the bean is the queen of the bean. And according to this, that basically means that, like, Henry's going to fuck the queen of the bean. But then the queen of the bean that year is this woman, Penelope, who just, like, really leans into it. And in particular, really leans into, like, doing
the
a bunch
BDSM.
of BDSM stuff, which Catherine manages to embarrass him out of by having Kenna talk Penelope into doing, like, a version of BDSM where he's, like in
the
Jesus
dominatrix
pose.
thing.
Yeah, but he's, like, in Jesus pose. And
yeah,
then, like,
on a cross.
And then, like, an actor playing a bishop comes in and is like, this is blasphemy. And then Henry's like, oh, that's
he also
bad.
gets, like, Kenna to give her wedding ring from Bash to the Queen of the Bean. Like, he demands that because she's just like, I want it. And he's like, okay, Kenna, you have to get... And basically, just constantly going insane. And everyone's like, I think maybe it's time he be dead, actually. Yeah. And they're all like, good idea. And so it's amazing this is still season 1.
Yeah.
Like...
And we're murdering the king of France, including, like, that they try to poison him a couple of times. I love the attempt to kill him by poisoning the communion wafer.
That's amazing. They're like, ooh, he's so Catholic. You know what we gotta do?
I know. I'm like, I know this isn't gonna work because I know what happens, but I'm still like, oh man, I really want this to be how he goes.
Well, there's that amazing poisoning scene with the gold in, like, episode 3 where those men take the castle and are trying to, like, rape Mary and her ladies, but Elizabeth comes in clutch because she poisoned all the gold. And that's when we do learn that she's a sexual assault survivor, which does come into play in later seasons. Reign is literally, no exaggeration, the only time I've seen a sexual assault narrative done respectfully in TV. And it's like a fictional assault that happens, but, like, it statistically probably she was assaulted at some point. That's just, like, being a woman at any time. And I remember they dealt with it very well, and they showed Catherine and Mary have a thing where Catherine says, trust me to help you through this because I promise you I can. Yeah. And then she helps Mary. There's, like, a whole arc of her helping Mary deal with her PTSD, and it's very well done. And just when they showed the scene, they barely showed it, and they focused on her face. And so when they make it clear, like, very, and at the end of the episode, they had, like, Megan Follows and Adeline Kane do, like, a PSA about this, and, like, they shared, like, the number for the rape crisis hotline and, like, how to talk about if you have PTSD. And so I always respected that this show showed her in the beginning that had happened to her. And when she says, I love her line where she says, history is written by the survivors and I surely am that. I was like, oh, girl. Like, there's the writing, the dialogue in this show, I think, is phenomenal. Like, the women have these killer one-liners that they'll just drop, and it's amazing, and I love them. And just, like, there's the scene where all the Scottish men, like, randomly come for a party, and they say to her, they, like, bow to her, and they say, we have waited such a long, long time for you to rise. And it's just...
That was a great scene.
When it leans into, this is a show about, like, this very heroic woman, like, it has those moments where it's like, yes, we're doing, like, a teen drama in a castle, but then it will lean into, like, she was this remarkable woman who did all these amazing things and saved all these people. And I always love the scenes that lean into that, and also lean into that for Catherine. And they only get more and more. And you get so much more of Catherine in the coming seasons. So if you like her, that's my big sell that you should watch all of it. Because she gets very prominent in the coming seasons. they were very good at looking at what the fans wanted, because it was very clear no one gave a fuck about this weird supernatural plotline.
Right,
so after season one,
never mind that whole situation. Okay.
There was actually never pagans or ghosts. Moving on.
Don't worry about it. On Catherine, I will say that while on the one hand, the Catherine as poisoner trope is one that to some extent I tend to find somewhat tired. And it's like, okay, yeah, everybody thinks she's a poisoner because she's like a woman and Italian. But
yeah, of course.
That bit where it turned out that she poisoned those men using the gold was still extremely satisfying. It was also very entertaining that then Mary stabbed this random Italian count with a fork.
Oh, yeah.
And murdered him.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, she's such a complex woman. They both are. And even though, the season one is a little ridiculous with their rivalry, it still shows that, they're these both they don't feel two-dimensional, which, so many shows that focus on women in general, but women in, these positions of power would just, cast Catherine as the clean-cut villain, and she's not. You understand why she's doing it. She firmly believes her son will die, and one, he's her son, she loves him, and two, that's her only purpose in this life was to have a son, was to have a king. And so if she no longer is the mother of the king, then what is she? And but can you imagine if someone's like, I've actually been trying to sabotage your marriage because my son will die if he marries you, and you're
it's there's a prophecy,
what?
And she's like,
you're like, my soothsayer bestie said so. I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? No.
Right, and at first she's like, are you fucking kidding me? And then she gets kind of convinced, right, by the fact that Nostradamus has this other prediction that came true, but the whole thing really is just so nuts.
I love in your notes here, you have, by the way, where did Mary get her fancy English dress on such short notice?
Yes!
Because they go to a joust, and Mary gets out in this gorgeous red dress.
Which has, the English crest embroidered on. I'm like, where did you get this?
She's staking her claim. Well, and that is another iconic line where Catherine says, I miss the girl you were. And Mary said, many will. She was easier to kill.
Right.
And it's just, that's an audio on TikTok now that people use all the time. Well, and then, do you want to jump ahead to how Henry dies?
Yes, which they in part, do actually get right, that Henry II was jousting, and man, rulers should really learn, not to do these fucking, jousts and fake battles. It's a dumb idea. This is dumb.
Can you imagine if our president, if Biden was like, hey guys, I'm going to go to a LARP and we're going to use real swords.
Oh, fuck, do I wish Trump has spent his presidency doing that. That would have been excellent.
Oh yeah, he should have pulled a Hamilton situation and done the duel. That's what they should have done.
Yeah, it would have been fine if Trump did that during his presidency.
But what's funny is, he does die in a joust like this, but actually, it was his son Francis.
Yes, who knew, oh, my father has lost it, and so I'm gonna replace the guy he's supposed to joust against, who, will pull his punches because he knows it's the king, and instead it's gonna be me, and I'm not going to do that, and so that is how, when reality is just a freak accident, right, that a lance smashes and a splinter goes into his eye. Yeah. And instead it's it's his son did that on purpose.
That's amazing. Obviously, Greer decides to lean into marrying Mr. Pepper fanatic Castleroy, because that's what makes sense.
Even though Lade gets titled because he is with, according to this, Francis led the successful attack on and conquest of Calais.
But too late.
Yeah, so he gets a land and titles because he's a hero of Calais. But yeah, too late, too little, too late in terms of his new prominence. Oh yeah, also in Henry's madness, in his celebration of the victory at Calais, he has a naval spectacle where there are ships filled with the survivors, and they're using real cannons, and one of them blows up the other.
And that's when they're like, oh, we also skipped back during the 3 days that Francis thought he wasn't going to be king. He him and Lola hooked up, and now Lola is pregnant with his baby.
Yup.
And it's and
that's why she has to secretly marry Andrew DeLuca, who it turns out is impersonating a nobleman and is just some random secretary.
So then she's I think it's time to get an abortion, old school. Meanwhile,
no. Catholicism.
And she's like, if only you knew who the father was. And then they were like, you know how we should end the season? The plague is coming, actually. And Francis learns that this is his child. So he's going to go get her and the baby. And Mary's like, what the hell? And he's like, no, I got to go. And the final scene is she says, lower the gates because the plague is coming. And they're like, but the king. And she says, the king knows the risks, lower the gates. And then like, that's the end of season one. That's amazing that's all season one. They put all of that in like 22 episodes. They were like, we got to really convince people to watch the show. How much can we get in here?
And it is just like so many intense, batshit plot lines, almost none of which have any basis in historical reality.
And it's like with any other show, like I recently had a relationship with someone who loved Supernatural. And so I did not, but I watched it with them. And, you know, they'd pick like one ridiculous thing. And that was the arch for this 22 episode season. Mm-hmm. So it would be like the apocalypse or we need to stop this demon. Reign has like 10 different arcs in a season because really you would assume when it starts that the whole don't marry Mary will be the whole arc. And it's like, actually, we need to murder the king. But like, actually, the illegitimate son might become the king. Actually, Mary almost married this violent person who beats people. Actually, it's actually, it's like, it's insane because it's just so much.
It's just
for a first season.
Much. Mary also has this like descent into ruthlessness, which involves her essentially as like this whole plot, which involves like stealing Catherine's money, but then also framing Catherine's cousin. So, like, somebody else, like, from the Medici family, framing her for this crime and having her head chopped off. Rest in peace, Hortensia.
You do what you gotta do when you a queen. You gotta be making those tough calls. Oh, my God. What a show.
What a show.
What a show. It's amazing. I remember I was rewatching it this summer and I told my friend Mara who'd seen it once and I was like, I'm rewatching Reign. And she was like, why? And it's like, you sit down and you're like, I'll watch one episode. And then you just keep clicking through them because you're like, oh my God, now what's happening? This is crazy.
It's a lot. So we've already started to touch on the, I would say, joyful ignorance of historical reality in this show. But
oh, yeah.
At this point, let's move into the Vera et Falso section where I'm going to get into a couple other details about that. And I in particular wanted to start with a number of intense misrepresentations of the Henry, Diane, and Catherine relationship.
Oh, yeah. Go for it. I'm not as well versed in that, so what's up? Tell me.
One of the things that I think is actually... Okay, so the way it gets depicted in the show, right, is this just kind of standard lady jealousy, right? Catherine and Diane hate each other and resent each other because they both want this relationship with the king.
Yeah.
Diane de Poitiers is, I think, a really fascinating figure because at least on her side, that was not the dynamic at all. She was just extremely confident in this relationship. And she, by the way, was like, I don't have the numbers written down, but like, I don't know, 15 years older than him or something.
Yeah, I did know that she was older.
Yeah, so she's older. And she is just supremely confident in their relationship to the extent that, you know, she never has this illegitimate son that she's trying to get legitimized. And
what?
No, yeah.
Bash isn't real?
Bash isn't real, everybody.
Oh, no.
But also that she very, very actively, Henry, in reality, and this they presented as like, once we loved each other. In reality, there is no reason to think Henri ever had the least bit of interest in Catherine whatsoever. Like, he was already with Diane when they got married, and he clearly was just, like, not here for this other person. Who, I mean, in this, like, Megan Follows is gorgeous. Catherine de Medici was not reputed to be particularly gorgeous. And, you know, whatever, he had a girlfriend already, you know, he was happy with her. But Diane actually really actively encouraged him to spend time with, and in particular have sex with Catherine so that he could produce heirs to the throne.
interesting.
Yeah, which I find so fascinating as
that's
an
not quite
interpersonal
what
dynamic.
the show is delivering.
No, not at all. And, and they do, in fact, have a lot of children. There's also this bizarre element where at some point Henry basically in the show says to Catherine, I loved you once and then I decided that I didn't because I realized you were only using me to get heirs. And I was like, that's what the point of your marriage is.
Don't you want heirs, you dumbass?
Don't you
That's
also
the
want
point.
heirs? And also, this is
the heir and the
literally
spare.
This is
The
literally
heir and the
the
spare, my
point
man.
of
Come
getting
on.
married. And also exactly, like, very clearly what he was doing in his relationship with her. That very clearly he was having sex with her on the instructions of his mistress so he could produce an heir to France.
Yeah, it doesn't quite track, I gotta say. It's not like...
Yeah. And as I said, I do find that really interesting because while Catherine, I think, did at least to some extent resent Diane from what we can tell, although not, I would say... I'm not sure there's really particularly clear evidence to say that she resented Diane because she had any personal, like, feelings for Henry, as opposed to because it was embarrassing to be the queen and have your husband very, very publicly have this mistress. And she did
I would be embarrassed.
Yeah, and she did after Henry died, basically make Diane, like, return a bunch of jewels that belonged to the crown and made her give up some chateau that Henry had given her. So Catherine, I do think there was on her side this resentment, but as I said, I find it so fascinating that on Diane's side, there was none at all. That just she knew the score that, yeah, I'm the one who has this, I have this relationship with him. That's not going anywhere. I'm very confident in it, but I also recognize that I'm not his wife. This is his wife, and that is whom he needs to produce heirs with. And, like, I can, like, divorce love and sex from this perspective, basically.
Yeah. That is a bit different than what the show is. And then we have Bash, who, complete...
does not exist.
A complete work of fiction, for sure.
Yep.
Just, it's amazing how important he is to season one when he's not real. Because, like we said before we started, it makes sense. Because in real life, her four ladies were all named Mary, and we don't really know much about them. So it makes sense that for the show,
wanted to have them not all named Mary.
Yeah, so for the show, it makes sense that they would have different names and that you would make up plots for them. That makes sense because that also just has no real effect on in the long run Mary's timeline. Yeah. But to just be like, actually, this person who didn't exist was almost the king and almost married Mary, and it's like, no.
Including which Catherine almost nearly gets executed.
Oh, right. I forgot all about that. Yeah, that was...
Yeah.
I love when they come into her jail cell and she's just got, like, just servants. It's like a party in there. She's just like, whatever. Don't worry about it. It's like, ma'am, you're...
And that is another part of the dynamic that I think is really interesting, is that there's so much more pragmatism in a lot of ways in reality than there is in this depiction, where everybody is very much, ruled by their hearts and their passions.
Everyone is just passionate as hell and can't think logically at all.
Yeah, that Henri never would have tried to have his marriage to Catherine annulled at that point in time, and he didn't.
Yeah, it's been a long time too. That's your plan. Your kids are this grown, and you're like, you know what? You know what it's time to do?
Not that clear in the show, but there are an immense amount of children. There's
you meet them in later seasons.
Yeah, I can't remember the total number. There's at least in total 4 boys, 3 of whom will be King of France.
You meet 2 more in season 2. You meet Claude and you meet Charles. They come.
Right, we briefly met Charles already because we saw his 9-year-old betrothal situation.
Let me tell you, the age jump we get though, because he comes back already grown, and it doesn't make sense at all with how little time has passed. They just have this other actor come in and be him, and then Claude comes in and has a very big plot line in later seasons. She's great. She comes in and she's a very prominent character. And then they were about to introduce some more of the siblings at the end of season 4. They were setting up to start showing her other daughter, whose name I forget. I think the one we see get married,
Elizabeth,
in the pilot.
So we have the brief reference to Elizabeth, who's marrying Philip II.
Yeah, so they were setting up to show her in season 5, and then they didn't get a season 5. So there's like this meaningless scene in the finale of season 4 where Catherine's like going to meet with her, and I don't remember what they're talking about, but it ends up not mattering because they were canceled. But yeah, since like the children didn't all live there, they gradually start bringing them in later seasons. In later seasons, Charles is like such a brat, and he's like, "What? Francis doesn't deserve to be king. Why does he get to be king?" And Catherine's like, "Because he was born first.
That's how it fucking works.
This is how it's been. We're not suddenly creating a democracy out of nowhere. Calm yourself."
Wow. But it's also that like that's another big reason, right, that he would never want to illegitimize this to annul this marriage is because he has
so many kids,
many children, and there's so much bound up in this, right? It's all of these boys who are potential heirs. You know, one of whom like Henri who becomes Henri III of France, like he's briefly the fucking king of Poland because like why the hell not? Because he like pops over to Poland, which actually does have an elected monarchy, and he's like,
yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, it's not the same thing as, like, Henry Tudor, who had one child who was a girl. Like, It's not the same thing at all.
That puts him in such a different position, and actually, arguably, it makes it make good sense for him to annul the marriage and try again with heirs with somebody else, whereas it's the precise opposite with Henri II, that, he has so many children, and he's married, and the girls are being married into these other places, like, in the same year that Mary and Francis marry is, I believe, the year that Elizabeth marries, like, Philip II, the King of Spain. Like,
whatever.
He's not going to want to piss off the King of Spain.
Don't worry about it.
By being like, surprise, your wife is a bastard? Thumbs up?
He's like, just a fun thing to tell you. Speaking of marriages, though, in this fun fact, I learned this when I was researching her. A lot of people think that Queen Victoria popularized the idea of wearing white for your wedding, but Mary actually did wear white for her wedding, and that was unheard of because white was her favorite color. She just loved the color white. She loved wearing it, and it was seen as a color of death back then in England and France, but not in Scotland. And she was like, "No, I don't care." So she did actually wear white for her wedding, and that was like the planted seed of doing that. And then Queen Victoria made it like very popular to do that, to wear white for a wedding. Yeah, I do love that we get rid of Henry, though, in season 1, because he's so fucking annoying, and I'm really glad I didn't have to sit through him.
Dead.
Spoiler alert, he does show up as a ghost, though, in season 2.
Of course he does.
Because Francis is haunted. He's haunted by having killed his father. He's like, oh, no, my guilt.
Because watching this, as I did, because, like, I know this story, and I knew how Henri died. And I knew also, everything takes such a long time that I wasn't 100% sure if it would happen in this season. Though as the madness went on increasingly, I was like, that's got to be part of the climactic end of the season. I feel like, is that they have to kill them all.
Can you imagine if it wasn't?
Yeah.
They just threw it in and then resolved it. We're like, never mind. Also, the child in the walls never gets mentioned again.
And it's dumb. It's like, she's alive. And then it's like, whatever.
They're like, whatever. There's so many things they introduce in this season that you can tell they realize they introduced too much. So they're like, oh shit, better dial it back.
Yeah. But I was definitely like once like Henri was like, I'm going to joust so people will look at me instead of Mary. I'm like, oh, thank God he's gonna die. Because he died.
I was really rooting for it I was like, because I didn't like him at all. I can't imagine anyone did at the beginning of this show. Excuse me. But I was when he died, I was like, thank God. I was like, let's get that going. Because you're just waiting finally for Mary to be the Queen of France. Because that's the whole point, is that she was a queen of 2 nations and almost 3. Like, she almost ruled so much of the world at such a young age.
Yeah.
And, you're also waiting to see her get back to Scotland in later seasons. So I remember I was thinking, like, we're going to need to move this along.
Right, like, Francis die already so she can go back to Scotland.
Oh my God, when you get to season 2 and he dies, it's, like, ridiculous what they do. Because they, like, kind of do what happened, but don't, because they want to give him, like, a more heroic death.
Of course.
So they, like, change it, but loosely connect it to reality. So when you do get to his death, it's, like, it's so tragic because they adored each other. But, I'm pretty sure in the finale, they pull, like, a Titanic, and when she dies, she goes back to him. and they're in heaven together,
does.
and it is really beautiful. I sobbed. I was like, they loved each other. Like, I have this thing where there's like fictional representations of real people that I love. Like, so I think the real life Warrens were like con people, but when I watch the movies, I'm like, their love is so pure. They are beautiful individuals. They are doing these people a service. And so, like, did Mary love Francis in real life? Who the hell knows? I don't. Maybe as like a teenage love, but I don't know. But in the show, I'm like, the fictional representation of those two was like ride or die for me for years. I was like, their love is so true. They would do anything for one another. Like, because the thing is, by the time I got to season 2, I had already started to do all this research. So I did know how he died. And so when they started deviating, I was like, I see what you guys are doing here. He does still die. It's not like they make him live for this long time.
Yeah, they can't just have him be like,
can you
surprised
imagine if they just changed it?
Yeah.
They were like, he's actually been here.
Good. We're cool. We're cool. His brothers never became king. We're good.
Would you want to talk about Nostradamus? Because I know you said at the beginning you had a lot to say.
Yes.
And I don't know much about him, so I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so Nostradamus is actually, so it was not uncommon in this period for people to have basically court astrologers and alchemists and other various kinds of people who had the reputation as being magical practitioners, that there were a number of rulers who had at least some kind of interest in the occult in various ways. Queen Elizabeth had John Dee. Rudolph II had a kind of range of people, the Holy Roman Emperor. So it was, not uncommon to have something like this. And Nostradamus was actually brought to court by Catherine de Medici. And this was because he would publish these almanacs, which were basically things that were like kind of predictions for the year, which range from this is what I think the weather will be like to this is a good time to plant crops, and some of that would be kind of based on just general common knowledge, but also to vague predictions about threats to the royal family.
Yeah.
And so Catherine
read
this. Yeah, and so Catherine read this and is like, my family? Excuse me?
Wait, hold on. Hold the phone. It's like that joke of like Kevin Hart being like, you're not going to sweep past that. Like, you didn't say what you just said.
Right.
It's like, it's going to rain tomorrow and your son is going to die. It's like, hold on, what? What now?
So she calls him to court, and he probably, basically like thought he was gonna die for having predicted, like, because like there are arguments made in this period that predicting the death of a king at least is treason.
Treason. It's treason to speak. You're never supposed to speak about,
talk about it.
The death of. That was like with Anne Boleyn, wasn't that one of the things that she had made a joke about the death of Henry, and so then they were like, oh, treason.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if that was the case now in America? Like, so many of us would have been tried for treason because just like nonstop, we were like, I wish Trump would die.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
like,
same. No,
COVID,
I would
there. I would have gone.
I would be like, I wish. My dad constantly would be like, I wish every day. I pray I wake up and he's dead.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, like Brett Kavanaugh got COVID recently, and I'm like, because I don't, because it's like unfortunate when people who are vaccinated die. I hope he doesn't die of COVID. I hope he recovers from COVID and then the next day gets hit by a car.
That would be amazing. When Trump got COVID, I was like, here we go.
Fingers crossed, here we go.
I was like, oh, I believe in God again, because I was like, oh my God. No, that was, yeah. So if you're back then, I also love though that back then, like, paganism was illegal, but then this guy is like, oh, but I do this for politics, and it's like, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah,
and that magic's fine.
It's cool, yeah. And in reality, I would say they're not really I don't know. I mean, like, we're getting into the period where they do kind of care more about witchcraft, but, like, in terms of, like, paganism as, like, an actual religious practice, like, it's just not something that they're worried about. Like, because it's not really a thing. I mean, like, there aren't really. I mean, as I said, who knows what people are doing in the privacy of their own home.
They definitely weren't, like, in the woods directly outside the castle.
Like, committing human sacrifice, yeah.
To, like a few yards from the throne room.
But yeah, so Nostradamus gets to be basically kind of Catherine's personal astrologer. She like draws up horoscopes for all the kids, and she very much trusts in his predictions.
Yeah.
The other things I just wanted to note about Nostradamus are that he gets aged down a solid, 20 years in this show.
I did hear that it was a case of we gotta make this guy hot,
yeah,
I think.
We have to make him as young and sexy as possible, because then he ends up sleeping with Olivia briefly.
Oh, right.
Francis's ex-mistress, so, you gotta make him hot.
They really had to throw that in wherever they could. They were okay. who hasn't fucked yet in the show? Yeah. Who can we matchmake?
It honestly takes a surprisingly long time for Nostradamus to fuck.
He gives the energy. Well, yeah, and then they try to say that him and Catherine are fucking, that tries to be a rumor.
But they laugh it off, basically.
Yeah, because they give the vibes of they're just gay besties.
Yeah.
She definitely she doesn't give heterosexual vibes in the slightest.
Man, I would have loved if they'd actually ran with that.
That she was a lesbian.
Yeah.
I mean, you're that obsessed with astrology and you want me to think you're straight? It's not going to work for me.
Especially also because I think that would have been more fun, too, because, as I said, I think there's every reason to think that, neither she nor Henry, gave a shit about each other personally at all.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a great, I have sex with him so I can have children, and when I'm having sex, for fun, I'm having sex with women.
Yeah. There's this amazing scene in season 2, I think. It's not a spoiler. In season 2 where Kenna finds these two girls, these servants, just hooking up in the hallway. And they're oh, my lady. And she was what are you doing? And they think she's appalled that they're having same sex. She was oh, no, it's not that. I commend you for that. She was you just can't be doing it out here in the hall. And then she finds this book. Well, and then she finds that they're reading this book and they're literally reading some old school handwritten smut. And Kenna's I'm confiscating this as punishment. And it ends up just getting passed through all the women in the palace, this OG 50 Shades of Grey, and they're all oh my god, I'm not having sex like that. And then in this episode, everyone low-key for a minute is wait, you found 2 women having sex with each other? It's this episode where everyone has bi panic for a second, and it's amazing.
Oh, wow. But then there's also that whole bit of Henry essentially making Kenna have sex with women to titillate him, which was also a whole thing.
Because it came out in the late teens, it didn't, or early 20-teens, is there weren't really gay characters, right. But it did a lot of queer coding. Because again, it was network TV, so this was still if it were to come out now, I definitely think, if not, it would have had a lot of gay characters, or if not some, or if not heavily queer coded. Right. So there wasn't queer coding in this show, but there were nods to the fact that there were gay people.
There was also the one reference to that there was this, one of Lola's suitors is deemed unacceptable because he prefers the company of men.
Yeah, so
and
they did acknowledge.
And everybody's been Mary's don't you all prefer the company of other men? And Francis is I mean in bed specifically.
That's hilarious, that part. Yeah, so it's weird because it's everyone's technically straight, but it has such gay energy.
Yeah.
I think Lola was slightly coded, or not Lola, Kenna was loosely coded as being bi, because they do then have later seasons where she learns about women having sex with each other. But yeah, I do remember that scene where Mary is don't you all prefer the company of men? What? Are you kidding?
Yeah. But I will also add in that Nostradamus at least allegedly predicted his own death.
I did know that, actually. Yeah, that's crazy.
So he was suffering from gout, right? So it is to some extent a relatively safe bet. I mean, so certainly,
he was just guessing. He was I'm thinking this isn't going to pan out for me, actually.
And so I certainly would not put a lot of stock into the fact that, the timing of when he made his will or anything like that, because, you're ill, you make a will, that's a normal thing to do. But he did allegedly, at least, say to his secretary on the evening of, the evening of July 1st, he's you won't find me alive by sunrise. And then, he came in the next morning, he's oh, no, I didn't. You're dead now.
Oh, my gosh.
So.
Wow. What a way to go.
And there are actually, a ton of people, apparently. I mean, not a ton, but there are, people who genuinely, try to read Nostradamus's predictions and, think that they are, true and have predicted a bunch of things that have happened in history, which I do not give any credence to. But I
don't either. That's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. But I find it really interesting that he has had that he has been that compelling for so long.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense that they were going to try to see in this season, it's like a mix between supernatural and politics. They were trying to see what the audience would prefer which makes sense because this has never been done before, to make a show about a monarchy targeted at such a young audience, to be like, I don't know if like teenagers are going to want to watch just straight court politics. Yeah. But then we shocked them because we did. We were like, I do want to see these politics, because politics between teenagers is insane.
Yeah.
And so
because they're idiots.
From season 2 onward, they throw it out and the supernatural, and they just lean into the politics. So it is funny how in the pilot especially, it's so heavily like all those like moody shots of her like looking out at the water, and she thinks she hears someone behind her, and there's a lightning, and Nostradamus just looking all crazy. And then by season 2, they were like, okay, so it's actually just a political show now. Never mind all of that. We were kidding. Do you want to talk about their dresses now?
Oh, yeah. The material culture of this show is nuts.
Crazy. It's so funny.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're just wearing prom dresses most of the time.
They're just wearing prom dresses
and there's these,
the whole time.
Weird gestures super occasionally toward, like, things that are, like, a single clothing element that's loosely inspired on something in actual portraiture. But it's, like...
Yeah.
On top of, like, a weird sleeveless prom dress.
I would say Catherine, like, I know I'm not, like, a fashion historian. Catherine was the only one who, out of the women, looked, like, remotely like her clothes were meant to be from... Yeah, like, and again, as the seasons go on, they shift to having the women look a bit more historically. It's kind of like as they age, they start dressing like differently. But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting interviews with the costumers on this show about how this was always a choice to do it like this, and they were literally like directed to do it this way. And I think it's part of the charm of this show is how beyond anachronistic what they're wearing looks. And like, because even me knows nothing.
Trying.
It's so fun that they just are like, fuck it. Yeah, like the guy, and I love that no one cares what the men are wearing. Like they shoved the men in some doublets where like no one gives a fuck about you.
At some point, Francis, he gets these like weird like, but when he goes into war, he has this like doublet that has these weird like belt buckles at the neck. I'm like, okay, buddy.
Oh yeah. And then, meanwhile, I always love, like, in literally episode 2, Mary wakes up and the ladies come in to see her, and they're all wearing, like, different white nightgowns. And Kenna is literally wearing, like, this cotton nightgown that barely covers her ass, and she's wearing knee socks.
Of course
and I'm
is.
like... That's literally, like, less than underwear was back then, babe. Like, what are you doing? And it's just, like, their hair's always down. They're wearing, like, those hippie headbands, like, you know, like, straight across there. Yeah, Kenna always looks like she came... Kenna came straight from an American Eagle ad.
Or, like, Free People. Free People is the brand I was thinking of, which is absolutely where Kenna does her shopping. That she just has this, like, intense boho vibe.
She really does. Yeah, and then Mary, I love everything Mary wears for the most part. There's a lot of times where she's wearing like this high-waisted skirts with these big belts and then like little crop tops.
Right.
Because,
or like, and sometimes
that's how
like,
they dress.
Or sometimes there's like vests that are kind of shaped like something that would be a part of a completely different dress in actual 16th century clothing.
There's like that one episode, I think it's episode 1, where she's going to talk about Colin, and she's wearing like this dress where the skirt starts at like her hips and it's all the way up, and then she has like one of those like full body pieces of jewelry that like is like hanging in like like literally a full piece of body jewelry. And I'm like, you know, like they wore in the 1550s. Everyone's hair jewelry. All the women's hair is always down, which is, like, beyond
they
historically
also have,
inaccurate.
Like, beads in their hair.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, beads in their hair. Well, like, yeah, like, episode 1. They love headbands on this show.
Oh, my God,
they love
so
a headband.
many headbands.
Like, and it's normal to, like, not show the women in, like, bonnets and caps and stuff back then, because it just, a lot of times I've read that it is literally like harder to like frame a character's face, especially with like the bonnets from back in the day.
And I can also see the like elaborate headdresses as being like the elaborate headdresses that would have been popular as being like kind of a pain in the neck. I can
Yeah,
understand
and so, like,
that.
it's pretty normal for, like, people to pull a Hamilton where, like, from the neck up, it's not super accurate. But again, the fact that this show just fully leaned into who the absolute hell cares what they're wearing. Again, like, episode 2, she's wearing, like, a flower crown and, like, this skin-tight white lace dress. And it's like, that's why, like, in one episode when she's like, oh, I'm feeling straight-laced, it's my corset. Never mind that, like, the corset hadn't been invented.
This is actually a big pet peeve of mine, that people always
the corset
assume,
thing?
Yeah, that, like, the, like, super tight, like, uncomfortable, restricting your breathing corsets, that those are just a thing that they had in all of history, when in reality...
Yeah, it's a forever thing.
Yeah, when in reality, like, that's really a, like, 19th century phenomenon. The things that you would have had at this point would have been, like, basically, essentially, like, a bra.
Yeah, when I went to my first Renaissance festival recently, and I do love Renaissance festivals because no one is dressed like it's just the Renaissance. We're like, it's the past, and it's also a fantasy world.
And it's all the same.
I was wearing a Renaissance dress my friend gave me, no clue how accurate it was. And it was like one piece and then a skirt that went over it that had stays that laced up. So I was wearing stays. I do have, though, the Amazon corset that everyone bought after Bridgerton, and I did see so many of that there, like so much of the Amazon corset. And I know I'm like, I don't think we were wearing that back then, but also, like, it was just fun watching everyone's, like, attempt at, like, I'm from the past right now. Well, and, like, Bridgerton came out and everyone had to be, like, out of the woodwork being like, reminder, they were wearing half stays back then. And then, of course, like, they're wearing it over, like, naked skin.
Right?
And,
it's like, okay, sure.
Well, and also, like, she says she's wearing a corset, and it's like, no piece of clothing you have worn up until now looks at all like you have a corset on underneath.
Every single piece of clothing that she wears is clearly directly next to her bare skin. You can tell from like everything about, like, she is maybe like, wearing a bra, maybe.
Yeah, like, I'm like, this is skin tight, your natural figure. I mean, though, Adeline Kane, though, is so beautiful, though. Yeah, so whatever she wore in the show, I was like, oh, God, stunning, amazing.
I mean,
like,
a lot of the dresses were gorgeous. They're just very much not 16th century
There's,
dresses.
like, there's the one outfit she wears when she dances with Tomas, where it's, like, has, like, a ruff up here, and then, like, the sleeves aren't connected to the bodice.
She has so many, like, cold shoulder tops.
Yeah, and she wears a ton of, like, big tulle skirts. And, like, this is when, like, multiple pleats was big in the mainstream. It's funny because this also came out at a time when, like, you could argue modern fashion was not the most attractive thing. And so it essentially looks like a mix of, like, Tumblr mood boards from that era and prom dresses. Yeah. That's what's amazing. This show. And then the men are just in doublets, and no one gives a fuck.
The other thing I will say about the men is that, the doublets are whatever. I don't know. Some of them have some bearing on reality, and many of them don't. But the other thing that you see all the time, and this is something that I've seen in other shows too, is that especially the men who are the leads, a real, like, doublet and, like, men's, like, it would be, like, over a whole shirt, and, like, the whole setup would, like, be pretty full coverage. Yeah. And always it's like the men have everything, like, unbuttoned and whatever, and like down to their collarbone. Yeah, they've got these, like, half open chests. I'm like, okay, dudes.
Francis is always walking around like Mr. Darcy from, like, the final scene of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice,
and
with, like, his
shirt,
loose white shirt.
That is basically underwear. You're wandering around the castle in your underwear.
Mary's wearing, like, a poncho in one scene when, like, he comes up to kiss her and says, you should wear Tomas. He's literally wearing a knit sweater with holes in it, and she's wearing a poncho. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
These are the royals. They're running the country.
And they look like this. The furniture also is similarly baffling, and the decor, and that it just combines. It's like, the furniture is just, this seems old. So the furniture, just, like, with abandon, has occasional, a chair or something that looks like it could be from the 16th century. And then also here's something from, like, Louis XIV's Versailles. And then also here's something that, like, looks like what Marie Antoinette would have had.
They filmed this whole show inside an anthropology. The whole show. Filmed it in an anthropology.
Did.
The whole show is the vibes of, this looks like the past. And for people like me, I was like, sure. Like, I don't know anything about, like, I thought Bridgerton looked incredibly accurate until I got, like, a million TikToks telling me it wasn't. Right. And I was like, oh, I had thought that's what we dressed like back then.
There also is this one scene where Mary and Francis are probably making out. I don't know. But then on the wall behind them, there is what absolutely looks like the classic portrait of Anne Boleyn. And I'm like, what is that doing here? Like, of all people.
When Claude comes in season 2, she's got, like, that colonial thing where, like, her tits are, like, almost practically out all the time, like the corset with your like breasts up here. So she's like she's a few centuries ahead of the curve. Like, no, it's amazing. It's amazing how ridiculously costumed it is.
It is.
And going back and watching it now, since, like, again, when it was coming out too, like, we were just starting to see people start making, like, historical shows again. And, like, you know, now we've had Outlander and Bridgerton and Harlots and like, The Great and so many shows where they did attempt to have somewhat accurate costumes. And so it is funny to go back and watch it now after seeing, like, Outlander for years and be like, what the fuck are they wearing in this show? Right. This is not how anyone looked. Like,
yeah. And then the one other thing, actually, that I did want to make sure to note about historical accuracies and inaccuracies I find interesting the immense amount of, like, holidays and feasts and celebrations. And there actually would have been, like, more of them than you would think associated with court life, and in particular also, you know, things that are coming out of, like Catholicism, especially, like, pre-modern Catholicism has so many feast days, and, like, you still see this in some European countries, right? Like, I still remember the first time that I was in Spain doing research, and it was my last day, and I, like, had all these things that I was, like, gonna get done on my last day, and then I got there, and it's like, oh, it's closed for the Feast of St. Mary in August. Didn't you know about the Feast of St. Mary in August?
It's like, oh, right, that one.
Of course, the Feast of St. Mary in August, you know, as opposed to the Feast of St. Mary in March. But that, like, there really were, like, a ton of holidays. And in particular, the Bean Queen, while the details of it are not quite right, it is a version of something that existed where there would be festivities in which there would be one bean in a cake, and whoever got the slice of the cake with the bean on the Feast of the Epiphany would be the, like, king or queen for the day, and there would be kind of celebrations set up around that.
That's fun.
Yeah, and so that was sort of a real thing. The, like, it's only women and it's really to find a sexual partner for Henry for the day is, like, nothing.
What? You mean that's not how it went?
But I did find it interesting that, like, that in particular has connections to reality, and that in general, the, like, amount of events and holidays and festivities, I think, is a not entirely inaccurate portrait of what court life might have been like.
Yeah. We also have just the whole setup of her being at the convent for that long.
Right.
Was not the case.
So that actually should get us into the Historia at Veritas, where I wanted to get into more detail about, in particular, what the show does well and not so well about its portrayal of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
And I do think the real emphasis on her, you know, being a reigning queen, especially as the show goes on, is important, but it doesn't actually quite hammer home the fact that this has been literally her entire life, that her father, James V of Scotland, died when she was 6 days old.
I think the show does focus too much on her romance, which makes sense. Never mind the fact that, like, in real life, I think, like you have here in your notes, I think they were probably really close friends. I think they were good friends. I do not believe she was, like, this passionately, madly in love with him. She was in love with being a queen. Scotland was her priority. And that's one of the reasons, if you ever do watch the Saoirse Ronan movie, I think they really nail how dedicated she was to that. Because it's like, it's like they remember they need to mention Scotland. They'll be like, right,
Scotland,
that. And it's
Scotland.
like she was this incredibly important, tumultuous person in history, especially in this time of history. Everything about her existence changed the course of the world and the course of history, especially for the Western world and for England and Scotland. And, like, Scotland is the way it is today because of her. you know, people argue that if she had gotten to live and remain queen, Scotland could have been free and stayed free. And so, you know, in later seasons, they do show her go be in Scotland and they get rid of, like, focusing on the romance. But you can tell that was their plan on how to bring in the audience, was to harp on the romance.
That's something that I often find to be a problem in a lot of the ways Mary is traditionally presented, is that there is this kind of narrative about, like, Mary's assorted, like, romantic / marital choices, and, like, that as entirely being something that shaped her reign and her life. It frustrates me, and that's the kind of thing that, like, nobody would ever tell that narrative about a man.
Yeah, they put so much time on her with Francis in France when she was married to him for such a little amount of time when she was, like, a teenager. And, you know, again, like, later seasons will show her with Darnley, and she's very epic in that relationship. I think the show does a really good job of showing how smart she was. Because she, if you, like, look at, like, just Catherine de Medici, like, letters about her that she wrote, like, she was so intelligent, and she was a great politician, and she was dedicated to her ideas of religious tolerance, which would be considered radical now, let alone back then. And
just like she spoke, like, 6 languages. Like,
yeah, and she believed she could play all these instruments. She believed in gender equality. She was remarkable. And I think a lot of it is Adeline Kane's performance. I think she's perfect. I think she's giving this amazing performance. For the longest time, like, it was hard for me to, like, even now when I think of a fictional portrayal of Mary, I think of Adeline Kane before I think of Saoirse Ronan. I think Saoirse Ronan was amazing, but it's like I spent years watching Adeline do it, and that's how I got to know who Mary was through this show. And yeah, I think it focused too much on her being, like, a teenager in love than on what a brilliant politician she not only was, but, like, literally had to be, because Frances got to still grow up as a child and a rich prince, and she was in charge of a country, like, immediately. Like, you know, like you said, 6 days old.
Yeah, and not, you know, not necessarily doing that much, obviously, in practice, being in charge of a country, because, you know.
But she was responsible for this nation and then had to rule this nation while ruling another nation. And I think the show does an okay job in later seasons of showing that, especially in, like, season 3 when she finally gets back to Scotland. But in the first season, it focuses far too much on, like, the love triangle and the magic and everything. And it's because it's a CW show from 2013.
Right.
And they didn't think people were going to want to see politics so heavily. So they were like, how do we make this story, like, a fun Gossip Girl story for teenagers? Yeah.
And there are, I think, some interesting elements that it touches on here and there. I mean, I think it touches on the fact that there is this real challenge posed by the fact that she is the Queen of Scotland, and she is supposed to ultimately be transitioning into more personally ruling Scotland eventually, but that she has spent her entire life essentially in France, that she was about 5 years old. There initially was actually an effort, Henry VIII tried to have her married to his son Edward, so she could have married a different sickly king.
Wouldn't that have been something?
Could have married a whole, like, array of sickly kings. But
there were so many to choose from back then.
I know, but then the Scottish Parliament agreed instead on this treaty with France, and she was basically shipped off to be betrothed to Francis, and she was 5, he was 3 at the time. And I actually do think that while the, like, we're having amazing sex narrative that we have in this show, I'm like, not so much. I do actually think the real history of their relationship is kind of sweet in that they grew up together, despite the fact that from all accounts it seems like Mary was, like, gorgeous and brilliant, and Frances was, like, kind of not either of those things.
That's not going to bring in the viewers, though. That's not going to bring them in.
I know, but it seems like they got on really well, and she was, like, always really, like, sweet to him. And it's like, that's nice.
There's a French movie called Mary, Queen of Scots that I've seen, and it leans more into that because it attempts to show her whole life. It's a very boring movie. I don't think it does a good job of showing her at all. But she also has brown hair because we can't be bothered to invest in wigs, I guess, in these franchises. And it shows that more side of it. But, I mean, I do love that in this they have the joke about him looking sickly And then
Yes.
they're passionately in love. It's amazing sex. It's like this love could end bloodlines and destroy nations. And it's like, it's bullshit, but I'm so here for it. Every time I watch the show, I'm like, yes, oh my God, go to war for each other. Like, knowing full well that's not the reality.
Francis is not running off to war. Francis is, in fact, like, absolutely sickly. Apparently there's like accounts that are like maybe his testicles never descended. I don't know.
No, the sex was amazing. Don't know what you're talking about.
Definitely very possibly this marriage, like, it is very possible that this marriage did not produce heirs because it was never consummated.
Yeah, and if it was, not in a way that would work, or like in this, she's struggling to get pregnant, and they kind of pull that dumb narrative that, like, it's her fault, that, like, she's having miscarriages and stuff, when in reality, he probably couldn't produce kids. Like, it was probably, like, statistically, it's more often the man's fault anyway.
In this particular case, given that he was
it probably definitely was.
Yeah, it almost certainly is.
Yeah.
Assuming that they had sex at all, which,
again, if they did have sex, if not, it was probably, like, a Marie Antoinette situation. Like, they probably just, like, weren't really having sex, and so then thus was not having kids.
And to also really emphasize their ages, when they got married, she's 16 and he's 14 years old.
Yep,
like,
beautiful.
These are children. Like him in particular,
it's amazing
right?
That
like
the show is like casted 20-year-olds and was like, they're fucking, and it's amazing, and they're in and then they're in high school in real life. Can you imagine?
I know.
They're like the ages of the Stranger Things kids, and in this they're like, not only are they just to have in this sex, they're in charge of armies.
I know.
Actually. And it's like, what?
Vaguely like sick high school freshman. I'm like, you're not having sex. You're absolutely
and this
not
hot
having sex.
girl. Well, that's like, if you've ever seen, I haven't seen all of it, but The Spanish Princess, based on the the wonderfully accurate Philippa Gregory book.
I have not yet made myself tackle that one.
I didn't finish. I sat through The White Princess, and that was enough. I just did that because I love Jodie Comer. I have, unfortunately, read 3 Philippa Gregory books. Don't know why I've done that to myself.
I've read 2, and that has been...
There's I saw a joke one time that was like, Philippa Gregory never saw an incest plotline she didn't want to run with. And
wow.
But yeah, in The Spanish Princess, obviously, like, when Catherine of Aragon and Henry met, they were like, he was like 8 or something. Yeah. And of course, they like age him up to be like this hot teenager.
Yeah, of course.
Like, what are you going to do? That's not going to work for a modern audience. Because, I think it makes sense, though, why they did it. Because, again, a modern audience is not going to be well-versed in the history of how these relations work. So for a modern audience, you show, like, an actual 14-year-old and 16-year-old doing this, you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? What in the Riverdale are we watching? Like, and so... Yeah, it's, for the most part, I'm fine with all the changes they made. The only thing that always really bothers me is the Catherine and Mary thing is stupid. It's dumb.
I do certainly understand why they did all of that. The main thing that I just like find like slightly infuriating is the existence of Bash, I would say, and that whole
that's dumb.
Setup.
And again, if it came out now, I in no way think that would be there. But because, again, when it came out, I think a lot of the season 1 nonsense that ends up not existing in later seasons is because they wanted to try and get renewed. They were like, we need an audience. So it was like buzzwords. They were like, what pulls in teens right now? And love triangles were huge. So they were like, how do we insert that when it didn't exist? We make up an illegitimate son.
The other thing also that I will note in terms of Francis not being such a like sexy adult is that he becomes king, and he is 15 years old, I guess, when he becomes king. And legally,
he's like 15,
and legally that's old enough that you don't need a regent, that you are expected, you can run armies. You are expected at 15 years old that you can actually rule a country. Not saying that is generally a good idea, but that was legally the case, and that is normally the choice that was made. So I think it is really telling that actually was not the choice that was made with Francis, that Francis was actually given a regent, that he was not actually enabled to rule independently, which to me also very much speaks to the fact that he was probably perceived by his contemporaries as being like not even of the maturity or development level that would have been expected typically.
I mean, and he's an immature idiot in the show, too. Like, he doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. Like, she clearly knows how to run a nation, and he does not.
He's an immature idiot, but he's an immature idiot who is clearly, like, technically an adult, or at least, like, a young adult. Whereas this
it just makes sense that he's
a child.
Yeah, they still leaned into, like, she's more politically savvy than him because he's clueless. Mm-hmm. And she's like, that's not how the world works.
Yeah. But, yeah, I do think that that it is overall, I think, a really interesting way to potentially kind of get people interested in these figures, despite the fact that the specific choices that are made are often,
a lot of historical inaccuracy.
Yes.
Yeah, it really said historical fiction when it made it.
Yes. And I do also wish that it hadn't stuck with the, like, there are things that I really like about the depiction of Catherine, and as I said, I think Megan Follows is excellent, but I just, like, I find the, like, and Catherine was certainly ruthless in certain ways, but I find the, like, poisoner trope to be sort of tired, sort of misogynist, to be honest.
I think everything about her and Mary's rivalry is very misogynistic. It screams, a man wrote this, does not know how to have two women exist, two powerful women. You know, the only people Mary doesn't constantly fight with are the women who are inferior to her.
Yeah, the other woman that she can just order around effectively.
And, like, technically Catherine is inferior to her because she's a queen consort and Mary is a queen in her own right.
But Catherine doesn't agree with that, clearly.
Yeah, which even though that's just not true, though, she is.
Right.
But yeah, I think that whole plot line, it was just, like, fun when I watched it the first time because I knew nothing about them. And once I knew about them, I was like, it's fucking dumb. Like, rewatching it this summer, I was, like, texting my friend, I was like, this is stupid. And she was like, yeah, it is.
Yeah. So as I said, this show is really, really intensely invested in this kind of romance plot. And so if we can kind of move into the Fabula Nostra, where we come up with a show, film, whatever, inspired by this one, I actually would be really interested, and this is probably the kind of thing that I think maybe would work better as a sort of, moody film as opposed to this kind of, like, frothy television show. But I would like to see a show about, this particular couple, or about, kings and queens in general, that focuses on them as teenagers, but not in the, like, fun, sexy gossip girl teenagers, as opposed to the fact that, like, this experience is terrifying in a lot of ways. Like, Mary is, like, ripped from her family when she's 5 years old and, like, taken to this other place where, and she then, like, grows up there, and then she's, like, 16 years old and is, like, supposed to, like, be married and running married and ruling two countries. Like, what? So I would really love something that's just, like, focusing on how this is terrifying and weird.
I would love a, like, mini-series or something that's very serious and just is a bio story. Like, just full on is just her, as accurately as they can make it, follow her. Because I loved the movie with Saoirse Ronan, but that does only follow the tail end of her life. Because this is too much to shove into one story. And I want literally something that commits to following her whole life. Start with her as a kid, follow the whole thing, and not necessarily having to tell it chronologically. Like, we can have flashbacks to her childhood, but show the whole thing. And I don't want any main character to be a man. I want every man to be secondary.
Yeah.
I want it to be aggressively focused on her. Because that was probably another thing that just annoyed me about Reign, is we'd cut to these plot lines about the men, some of whom weren't real. Yeah. And I'd be like, I don't care what you're doing, Bash. Like, I don't care what pagan stuff your mom...
in the woods.
Yeah, like, shut up. Like, Henry and Catherine arguing about nothing. So yeah, I would love that. I just think that would be really fun if they did that.
Yeah.
Or just, again, try to be accurate, but just lean into the magic. Like, make Mary a secret witch. Like, just be absurd.
Go for it. If you're going to go
one
for
or
it,
the
go
other.
For it. Yeah.
One or the other. I want full absurdist, or I want incredibly serious biopic. That's what I want. One or the other. Like, no in between.
Yeah.
No in between.
The other actually thing that I want is that I want the Frothy CW prequel to this that is actually about Catherine de Medici.
Oh, yeah.
But that this is the one, it actually is more accurate and honest about what the dynamic with Diane is. I would love that. And also I feel like it would be really fun to also like lead into the like, I don't know, Diane kind of as like kind of a cougar aspect.
We do like a sequel. We follow the Jacobites. Like just do this whole dynasty in this absurd, anachronistic way.
But that's like, I would really like, I mean, I also like, I find Catherine de Medici really fascinating, and I would actually love for more stuff about her. So I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. I would watch that for sure.
Yeah. So for our estimatio or rating, how would you rate this on a scale from 1 to 5 based on whatever subjective criteria you see fit?
My subjective criteria is how much fun do I have when I watch it. It was less fun the second time just because I saw all the holes, but I'm trash for it. So I see your rating here. I give it a 4 out of 5 because I'm absolute trash. And the first time I saw it, I knew nothing. And I'm also very attached to it because my life is so affected now by the story of this woman, and I admire her so deeply, and I love her, and I've spent years researching her, and none of that would have happened if I had not seen the show. Yeah. If I hadn't seen it, I would not care. I would not have done the Her Story docuseries. I did. There's so many people I wouldn't have spoken to, books I wouldn't have read if I didn't watch this show. And so, like, looking back, obviously, it's a ridiculous, incredibly inaccurate show. But I just adore it. I adore the dialogue. I adore Adeline Kane's portrayal. And it got a bunch of young people like myself. I was 19 at the time. So this was like 8 years ago I watched this show, to be so interested in this time in history and this woman. Because I sensed as I watched it that this was not accurate at all. And so as I caught up and I watched the first 2 seasons and I was waiting for season 3, I said, okay, I'll go learn who she really was. And I did. And it was fascinating. And then I rewatched it this summer. And even though I knew all the like, oh God, none of that happened, her hair was red, it was still so fun. Like I still find it such a ridiculous, engaging. And I think it's a very good time capsule of how network TV worked in that era of time, because TV isn't made like this now. Like this isn't how TV works anymore. And I always think it's fun to go watch like very dated network television, all the fade outs for commercials and the very purposeful episodic moods to it. And I love so many of the side characters, even those who are fake. And I love Catherine, and I think she's such a powerhouse character. So yeah, even though it's not historically accurate at all, I do give it like a 4 out of 5 because I just have such fun watching it, and everything I know about Mary sprouted from me watching it.
That is definitely very understandable, and you definitely also have like, I'll have like media that we have soft spots for various reasons. Yeah. I will say this show grew on me as I was watching it. I definitely had a couple of episodes where I was just like, what is
it's
this?
wild.
And there is also very much still some amount of my inner history teacher, I mean, which is also, I guess, mostly my outer history teacher, but that on the one hand, I really do applaud something like this for getting people who wouldn't have necessarily, jumped on being interested in history, perhaps to like be interested in this historical figure in this period. And I do think that there is a lot of value in that. But I also just have this fear watching this that like one day I'm going to get some student who's going to like write this paper where they start talking about like the illegitimate brother of the King of France. And I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, who?
I've always been one of those people where I'll always like the piece of media that so many people think is trash, because I'll be like, for example, when Cats 2019 came out and everyone hated it, I knew nothing about that musical. My brother and I went as a joke, and we're immediately like, oh, I love this. And then went and saw the stage show. And then we're like, I think I need to know everything about the lore of Cats, and watched like a documentary on how they made Cats. And like, we'll just run our mouths about it. We'll like be like, and my theory about why Grisabella left the Jellicle Cats. And it's like, everyone hates Cats 2019, but I'm like, I wouldn't have ever even known I liked the stage show. Because to me, from the outside, I thought that looks dumb. I don't care. And so the same thing is like, I also just through watching this wasn't just I got interested in Mary. I just also got interested in the idea of learning about all these women from the past and what it meant to be a queen in the Western world back then. But yes, it is ridiculous. It's not like a good show by like technical terms, but yeah, it is. And again, it's funny to think how like it was very successful when it was on, and it would never get made now. Right. Like there's no way you pitch this now and it gets past like 2 episodes.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think I'll settle on a 2 out of 5.
Nice.
It is wild, but it definitely has some interesting elements as well.
Do you
as
think
other
you're going to
things.
watch the rest of it? Do you think you're going to watch the other 3 seasons?
You know, I think I was feeling mixed on that, and I think you have talked me into continuing
Nice.
for a bit at least. Yeah, so
I hope
we'll
you
see.
like it. Yeah, it gets more political, and in season 3 they introduce Elizabeth. There's still a lot of ridiculous romance. They do still heavily harp on that. There's more made up people, but it's crazy. It gets even crazier. They drop the supernatural and just lean into like these absurd politics, and it's fun. And she does eventually go back to Scotland, and it's a crazy good time. I also recommend the movie with Saoirse Ronan. I adore that movie too. If you want like an accurate, serious portrayal. That only shows like the end of her life.
Right.
But Saoirse Ronan's iconic. It's an amazing film too.
Also, I will actually just mention my one other thing is that, so it turns out in this thing that it's like isn't what really happened, but that I am fascinated with the poison dress trope being presented as like a genuine like problem faced by early modern royalty.
I wasn't aware that was happening so much.
Yeah, no, it shows up a lot in folklore and in like things that people feared, but there is, I believe, no actual evidence that it literally ever happened. But it's in Elizabeth. We have a poison dress plot, and we do have a like hint at it in this as well.
That's hilarious. That was something they were like, I'm gonna run with it.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a plot point.
Let's go with that. But yeah, so it's just like, it's just so bizarre. And as I said, I just like I feel like I have so many just like concerns about people who come away with this and then like cite things, and they're like, oh yeah, I would like to write a paper about like Tomas, the illegitimate son of the King of Portugal. And I'm like, I'm sorry about who?
I do think it is like one of the fun things of ADHD is hyperfixation, where once I want to know something about a topic or a story, I'll go know everything about it. Like there's no in between. So like once I see something and I'm like, I enjoyed that, I'm like, time to spend days. And then in the case of Mary Queen of Scots, I was like, time to spend a summer making a documentary, time to interview historians about this.
Yeah.
And I do understand that most people, like, not most, but a fair amount of people watch something like this, historically inaccurate, and are like, oh, okay, and take it at face value. I will say, though, I think Reign is so aggressively inaccurate that even people... It's like, I think it's like Bridgerton. I watched it and I for sure thought that, like, for the most part, I was like, I don't think the Regency is this ridiculous. But I do think Reign is so aggressively inaccurate and anachronistic and over the top that even my dad, who knows nothing, looked at it and was like, I don't think they dress like that. It's like, yeah, I don't either.
Right. Yeah, I think that what, for me, it's not like it's the, especially with like the political stuff, it's the combination of real things and fake things. Yeah. And like the way that they are sometimes interwoven together, which is, I would say, what does probably most sort of set my teeth on edge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, yeah, the first time I saw it, I knew nothing of the political stuff. So it didn't matter to me.
Right.
And then, yeah, it's one of those things where upon rewatch, I didn't like it as much because I knew what was wrong. And so I definitely think it's a more enjoyable show if you know nothing about it.
Right.
If you don't know that history, because then you're like, oh my God, what? But yeah, if you do know the history, then you're like, oh, this is stupid. That's like how I feel with the musical Six. I'm like very torn because I think like the whole musical is a bop, but then like Anne Boleyn's song comes on. I'm like, what the hell is this?
This
isn't right at all.
Actually that really doesn't work for me. Like, it's a very fun song, but that is the one where I feel
torn,
like the portrayal of Anne I really disagree with.
Yeah, like the politics, not my thing. I'm like, she's a
like, no, absolutely not. Yeah.
Like, you could just watch the show The Tudors and get the information that that's wrong.
And The Tudors, and don't even get me started about the historical inaccuracies
like
of that one.
Yeah, it's not like The Tudors was the pinnacle of historical representation in media, so...
Yeah, and I adore Six, and that is like, that for me is like the one really big off note. Like, I actually really love the Anne of Cleves song, and I find it really interesting.
Oh God, it's so good.
And like, there are things that actually I really like about like Catherine de Medici's song.
I love the finale song. Yeah. Just Six, it's like that song. It's so campy and I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Reign is very similar to Six. And it gets people interested even though it's incredibly inaccurate.
Yeah, and I guess for me, what makes me like slightly more like about this than 6 is that, like, 6 is so in some ways sparse in terms of the amount of detail that I feel like you, like, know that you're missing
it's like an hour-long show.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is a
4-year-long
project.
Yeah,
so
and
different.
There's, like, so much detail, as I said, that you get into this period, and so it's that, I feel like there's just so many plot lines that I'm not sure a casual watcher it would occur to them that, like, oh no, they just completely invented this.
I think that's honestly just also a problem, just a risk you run when, like, anything not a serious biopic gets made.
Yeah.
It's just, sadly, like, just how it is, because we also just, like, we don't teach enough legitimate world history in schools. So, like, and we don't even teach our own history well, because let me tell you, my public school education was so bad that I thought we won the revolution in 76. So when I listened to Hamilton for the first time, and it was like 1776, New York City, I was like, what the hell? Because my education was so bad.
Right.
And so, like, I listened to Hamilton, and then I went and saw it, and I was like, this is news to me. This wasn't on Liberty Kids.
I know. It's like, that's really a bad sign when, like, if you take, like, the musical 1776 and Hamilton, you would actually get a more accurate version of the American Revolution than what is taught in some schools.
I asked a friend, the year it came out, who went to the same high school as me. I was like, hey, because she hadn't listened to Hamilton yet, and I was like, I have a question. When do you think we became a country? Like, when do you think we won the war? And she was like, 1776. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm not the only one who was very off on the date. Because in my mind, the Declaration of Independence and we win the war, same thing.
Huh.
Because I was not taught well.
That's so interesting. So then
I wasn't taught that anyone but Jews went to the concentration camps. It wasn't until I was in college and my mom was watching the movie Swing Kids. And she was like, oh, yeah, the Undesirables Act. And I was like, the what? So, like, I think the thing is, something like this is so inaccurate and most people aren't going to know it's inaccurate. Yeah. I certainly didn't. It's not like I sat down and was like, oh, yes, I come into this with my wealth of French and Scottish historical knowledge.
Right.
They should just start putting, like, disclaimers in front of the show. That's
right.
Like, this isn't accurate.
Like, no. That I love it. They just, like, flash at the bottom of the screen, like, a little, like, red X every time something, like, particularly egregiously inaccurate happened.
I think there's scenes of this show that are about as accurate to her life as, like, how George R. R. Martin says Game of Thrones is the Wars of the Roses. Like, it's about the same level of accuracy that's saying that sentence.
Uh-huh.
Whenever that man said that, I was like, shut up.
Right.
I would see, like, all these things where people would be like, Daenerys is Henry VII. And I was like, no, she's not. Stop it.
Yeah. I mean, and also, you know, my pet peeve with George R. R. Martin is that he's always like, well, we have to depict, like, tons of rape because that's just what was happening constantly in the Middle Ages. And I'm like, actually, there's literally no evidence that rape was more common in the Middle Ages than it was now. So, you know, maybe you should say every time you make a movie about a college campus, you should be required to depict a rape because it's
that would be more accurate,
happening.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, my thing with him is I don't like him at all. And he, like, hates his fans. Like, he'll be at conventions and be like, I hate you guys, and I hate your fan fiction, and I hate this. And it's like, shut up.
Right, and he had this whole thing where he was like, my fans guessed the plot line that I was following. And I was like, I don't know,
so
should I change it? I'm like, fuck you, no.
I'm like, you're an idiot. And that is the thing with the history, too, of the shows, is, like, I'm still, and again, like, as, like, an average person who doesn't, like, have historical training besides, like, the random things I chose to learn about. Like, I recently read Henry VI Part 1 by Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I thought Joan of Arc existed in history, but I had no idea it led into the Wars of the Roses. I didn't know that's, like, where she fit. Mm-hmm. All I knew was, like, the past, castle times. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think that's the thing with Reign is they do tap into the idea that to most of us, we don't even know how to separate Middle Ages from Renaissance era. We're just like, castle times.
Right.
The past.
Yeah.
Like, Reign basically feels like a Renaissance festival.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely does.
We're all pretending. Like, when I went to the festival, I was like, am I on the set of Reign right now? Like,
right.
It's just the old-timey enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
And, like, simultaneously, you know, I have this, like, grumpy medievalist thing where a lot of the things that tend to be associated with the Renaissance are sort of fundamentally wrong, and there are a lot of continuities as well as changes if you're going from the medieval period to the early modern period. But on the other hand, it is also just an endless source of frustration for me that there are all of these things that are just like, so everything was the same for this period of like 1,000 years,
centuries.
I think.
Yeah, I think that shows, though, I always say everyone has, like, the one thing they're allowed to be, like, incredibly pretentious about because it's the thing they know the most about. So I went to school for poetry specifically. So I'll be, like, not judgmental that much at all about, like, any form of writing. And then the second it's poetry, I'm like, well, actually, guys, the reason, like, and so I think everyone has, like, their well, actually. And so I definitely, like, totally get, as a historian, watching things like this and being like, no,
how are you
that's
doing
not how. Whereas, like, I fully understand that I went into Rain being like, I don't know shit. Let's watch the show.
Yeah.
And I remember the girl I was dating at the time and her roommates, we'd all watch it together. And it got to the point where in the last 2 seasons, we were, like, Googling the history. And we'd be like, all right, that happened. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like, it became, like, a bingo game. Because in the later seasons, it starts being more accurate than not. But we had, like, known that season 1 and 2 were so off the rails that it got to the point where halfway through season 2 was when I started researching. Because I was, like, pretty sure Bash wasn't real. So I was like, who did Mary marry? And I was like, all right. I was like, that's what I thought.
And because there's these things, like, you know, I mean, so, you know, I'm watching it and there's, like, the bit where, like, this, you know, random Italian count or whatever, like, takes over the castle. And I'm just watching this and I'm like, I mean, I know that there was, like, that, like, France was, like, at war, like, that there were, like, this was the period of, like, the Italian wars. I'm like, I don't think this happened, but, like, did this happen? And I'm like, I resent that I had to Google that.
The way that that's a 1-episode problem.
Of course it is.
But it's the way that that's a 1-episode issue.
Yeah.
It's just so fun. They're like, our lives are in danger. No, they're not. We killed them. Never mind.
We killed everybody. We're good.
They're like, there's hidden passages. We are going to mark them with chalk and get the hell out of here. And they're like, we're never going to mention that again, actually. Yeah. Don't worry about it. I love the chaos. It's so fun.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, so that is Rain.
Rain, that's Rain.
So, Molly, first of all, thank you for bringing this to me.
Thank you so much for doing this.
And are there places where the listeners could find you on the internet?
Oh, so I'm an indie author. I have a illustrated poetry book co-authored by Marcy Ruiz called Not a Myth. That's on Amazon. And my debut novel, which is a vampire romance novel called Bite Back, comes out on November 8th. You can pre-order it on Amazon. And I run a virtual theater troupe on YouTube called Theater But Better. And we do Shakespeare and cult classic media. And then literally on just all social media, I'm Magical Molly, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all that. Thank you so much for having me do this. When I found your podcast and I was listening, I immediately was like, I hope she talks about Rain one day. And then I was like, I think I'm going to, how do I get in touch? I'm going to suggest she talk about Rain.
Thank you so much for getting in touch. This was a lot of fun. And
it was so fun.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would have gotten around to tackling it or when I would have gotten around to tackling it. So...
Yeah, and I always love talking about this show, like, with, when I got to talk about it with, like, Dr. Anna Groundwater and Kristen Poles-Walton with, like, historians. It's always so fun to hear a historian talk about the, like, absurd portrayal of that point in history that they study. So, yeah, this was super fun. And it's Halloween while we're doing this. So happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween. This episode's probably going to be out in, like, January, so happy Halloween,
I know,
everybody.
It is still fun. When you were like, oh, next Sunday, and I looked at my calendar, I was like, just so I'm sure, Halloween, correct?
Right.
You were like, yeah, Halloween.
Yes, I'm like, I'm just, like, in, like, deadline hell right now, and so I have no idea what anything is,
Makes sense, but I'm excited for whenever this comes out to hear just this endless spiel about this absurd show from many moons ago.
Yes. So if you have enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe in your preferred podcatcher app and rate and review Media-eval on Apple Podcasts. I'll read new 5-star reviews in future episodes. Please also follow the podcast on Twitter at Media-eval-pod and join the Facebook group. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sarah Ifdecker. And if you have any questions or suggestions, or including would like to suggest something else to cover on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you via email at media.evalpod@gmail.com. So, Molly, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for listening to Media-eval. Bye.
Bye.